There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Please be seated. Order, honorable members. The secretary will read the order of the day.
Debate on National Women's Day, celebrating the 60th anniversary of the Women's Charter and 20 years of freedom, together moving a non-racial, non-sexist South Africa forward.
I call upon the Honorable T.C. Memela.
Madam Speaker.
Is that a point of order?
Madam Speaker, it is a point of order, and I'm sorry to have to raise it in the House. But we reached agreement on the seating, and it was supposed to have been implemented today, and the seating is not in accordance with the agreement. And I just want to say that it's now again caused rank confusion in our benches, because there's uncertainty again about where people should and shouldn't be sitting. I'm really imploring, Madam Speaker, that whoever is responsible has this attended to before we sit tomorrow as a House, so we can have it finalized. Thank you.
Perhaps honorable members are confused about what this is. We had a meeting in my boardroom yesterday to try and assist this disagreement about seating between the DA and the EFF. And as far as we understood, there had actually been agreement about how that issue should be resolved. That was yesterday, and in fact, it didn't arise yesterday afternoon, as you will remember. And so I can only record my disappointment that apparently it was not resolved. But I don't want the matter to delay the House, and would like to suggest that we take it up again later as the Chief Whip of the DA is requesting. The Honorable Memela.
Honorable Speaker, we request a right to reply. We are not in opposition to any arrangement reached with the Speaker by the parties yesterday. We only see it as it is written here. And if names of people still appear somehow, EFF cannot be held liable to that.
All right.
Thank you.
So please, let's not delay the business of the House. We've now explained what the issue is, and we will have to take it up and pursue it from where we left it yesterday in our discussion. Honorable Memela.
Honorable Speaker, Deputy Speaker, Chairpersons, Deputy Chairpersons, Honorable Deputy Ministers, Honorable Members of the Parliament, distinguished guests in the gallery, ladies and gentlemen. The ANC has been at the forefront of women's struggles by putting forward a vision for a non-sexist society and institutionalizing gender equality and women's empowerment through its policies, its institutional arrangements, and intervention measures. The ANC Constitution articulates non-sexist policies to have indeed influenced the current constitution of a free and democratic South Africa. Accordingly, the ANC Constitution of the country's 1996 recognized women as equal citizens with equal rights and responsibilities. A lot more still needs to be done. While several gains have been made and many milestones achieved, challenges still remain. More work needs to be done to ensure the transformation of power relations between women, men, institutions, and laws, elements that are fundamental in building an inclusive, progressive, and prosperous society. Collective efforts must be directed at addressing gender inequality, poverty, oppression, patriarchy, and sexism in order to create a conducive environment which enables women to take control of their lives. There's still a need to create a woman-friendly environment that is gender sensitive and capable of eradicating the many practices that constrain women advancement and empowerment. It is thus important that in order to effectively implement policy decisions that impact on women's empowerment and gender equality, that it is acknowledged that men are victims of their socialization, hence the historic sense of superiority manifested by some over women. Therefore, to achieve the ANC's vision of gender equality, women also need the equal enjoyment of rights and the access of opportunities and outcomes, including resources. There must be fair distribution of resources between men and women, the redistribution of power and care responsibilities, and freedom from gender-based violence. The underlying causes of discrimination should be systematically identified and removed. Women existing subordinate positions within social relations and the family should be considered with aim of restructuring society so as to eradicate male domination. This equality should include both formal and substantive equality to ensure a total eradication of patriarchy. The ideology of patriarchy has surpassed the ideological construct of racism. There needs to be an address of the issues of two different constructs. The way of thinking about gender equality as a norm, in other words, there needs to be a move for a total paradigm shift in thinking, practices, and perspectives. The struggle against patriarchy is therefore a struggle within the struggle. The ANC notes in its 53rd National Congress in Mangaung that there still needs to continue to systematically fight against patriarchy and any other forms of abuse against women in society. Whilst progress has been made in the development of women, the establishment of a ministry that focuses on women development, there's still a need to effectively implement programs and policies geared towards the development of women, in particular, those that live in abject poverty, the disabled, and the most vulnerable in society. This includes access to opportunities, access to free basic services, and continue to systematically fight patriarchy in society. In 2000, Cabinet adopted the South African National Policy Framework for Women's Empowerment and Gender Equality, which provided for the establishment of the national gender machinery. The NGM is a network of coordinated structures with and outside government which operate cooperatively in facilitating political, social, economic, and other forms of transformation to dismantle systematic gender inequality and promote equality between women and men. Yangiso Makhura. Since the adoption of the NGM model, there have been a number of developments in the operation of government and social behavior. This has led to calls for a relook at the model with emphasis on the highest executive coordination point, hence the call for a dedicated women's ministry. In 2014, National General Election Manifesto, the ANC, asserted that in a democratic South Africa, women's voices are heard and women's issues are seriously addressed. Institutional mechanisms have been established to protect women's rights and dignity. Progress has been made in freeing women from customs and practices that undermine their rights. Progress in meeting basic needs such as housing and access to water has especially benefited women. Redressing past inequalities. More girls are in school and tertiary institutions than ever before, and more women are in employment. Women continue benefit from economic empowerment programs, and they are the major recipients of social security programs. Furthermore, the ANC had established the Ministry for the Women, Children, and People with Disabilities, the predecessor to the current ministry in the presidency. The ministries have taken up and continue to take up active campaigns against the abuse of women and children. Improved representation of women in parliament and government, and promoted a policy of equal representation of women and men in all institutions of government. The ANC has continued to confront the violence against women and children and prioritize it in its strategic directed at creating a safe and secure society. In this regard, the aforementioned ministries have played an instrumental role in the drafting of the Women Empowerment and Gender Equality Bill. The work bill aims to introduce measures and targets to strengthen existing legislation on the promotion of women empowerment and gender equality. The proposed legislation carries forward the Constitution vision of equality by requiring the development and implementation of plans and measures to redress gender imbalances and to submit those plans and measures to the Minister for consideration, evaluation, and guidance. The ANC noted at its 53rd National Congress in Mangaung that progress has been made in ensuring that women are now actively involved in decision-making, structures in society and in government. This includes progress towards achieving the 50-50 parity. In addition to the progress made by government in the development of women, some civil society structures are also involved in campaigns that focus on establishment of centers for the fight against women abuse. Furthermore, government policies and programs have improved the living conditions of women. In 1997, the Office of the Status of Women was established in the presidency to steer the National Gender Program and champion the development of the National Policy Framework for Women Empowerment and Gender. Equality was approved by Cabinet in 2000. Subsequently, similar structures were established in the Premier's office. In May 2009, the President pronounced on the establishment of a Ministry for Women, Children, and People with Disabilities. In May 2014, the President evolved the structure to a dedicated Ministry of Women in the Presidency as a way of elevating women's issues and interests to lead, coordinate, and oversee the transformation agenda on women's socio-economic empowerment, rights and equality through mainstreaming, monitoring, and evaluation. South Africa has adopted significant legislative reforms and developed policies and programs based on the Constitution and Bill of Rights, which seek to promote and protect women's rights in the home, the community, and the workplace. These include the Domestic Violence Act of 1998, the Prevention of Family Violence Act of 1993, and the Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act of 2007. Since the advent of democracy and freedom, South Africa has seen a number of women taking up leadership positions in areas previously dominated by men. One of the success stories of our democracy is that of the representation of women in political and decision-making positions. Involving women in governance processes constitutes one of South Africa's globally acclaimed success stories. Ke a leboga, thank you.
The Honorable D. Robinson.
Honourable Speaker and members, today we mark the 60th anniversary of the Women's Charter and 20 years of freedom, together moving a non-racial, non-sexist South Africa forward. Do we indeed have something to celebrate? And is South Africa really a non-sexist country? The Women's Charter, written in 1954, includes some of the following points.
Excuse me, is that a point of order or what's happening?
Yeah, was point of order, Speaker.
Yini?
Somlomo bengicela uqonda ukuthi kuvumelekile na kulendlu okokuba kunxitywe izinto ezinempawu ze-political parties like i-DA apha ecaleni kwam.
Uba ndikhumbula kakuhle, omama kwiminyaka egqithileyo, nam lo ndiyakhumbula ngomnye unyaka ndihleli apha ndinxibe iblouse egreen. Azange ke sibethwe ngaloo nto. Ndizama ukuthi ke mhlawumbi zange ke kube khona ingxaki kuba umuntu enxibe into acinga uba yena hayi indenza ndibe mhle namhlanje. Uba ngaba ikhona into erongo mhlawumbi ke singacela i-Rules Committee ikhe iyijonge.
Speaker, Honourable Speaker,
Bani
Honourable
lo?
Speaker,
Enkosi kakhulu, Speaker.
Honourable
Ndiyabulela.
Speaker,
Uphi lo muntu?
ngapha on your right. Honourable Speaker,
Angimboni lo muntu uthi Honorable Speaker. Utsho kamandi, utsho lo phansi. On my right. Oh, okay.
Honourable Speaker, I just wanted to know whether the honourable member can take a question that isn't that the ANC has made it possible for women.
Sis. No, masiqhubeni nengxoxo ngomama. So
Do we-
please allow her to continue with her speech.
Do we indeed have something to celebrate? And is South Africa really a non-sexist country? The Women's Charter made some of the following points. The struggle for the removal of laws and customs that deny African women the right to own, inherit, or alienate property is still ongoing. The laws of marriage, which place wives in legal subjection to their husbands, still dictate to them in all matters affecting their children, property, and earnings. Women are responsible for their own person and their children, yet the law seeks to enforce upon them the status of minors. They are denied the same status as men when entering into contracts to own and dispose of property and to exercise guardianship over their children. This treatment of women would have been reinforced by the traditional courts bill, which was almost imposed on us in the previous term. The law has also lagged behind the development of society. It no longer corresponds to the actual social and economic position of women. The law, instead of protecting women, has become an obstacle in the path towards gender equality. Legal protection must be reformed for a modern society and a society in which the women of our country are to be protected and treated equally. This begs the question, in the 60 years since the Women's Charter's creation, how much has been done to address these problems? Domestic violence and gender abuse is still prevalent amongst women of all socio-economic and racial groups. This is a health and human rights issue. Good legislation has been passed to combat the scourge, but sadly, implementation is often poor due to the under-resourcing and inefficiency of the police and the justice system. There's a shortage of shelters for women who've been abused. Where do women and children go after they have been abused? Often the only place to which they can go is the home of the perpetrator, where the vicious cycle starts all over again. Government should make more funding available for additional Tutuzela centers, where a one-stop multidisciplinary service can be provided for the victims. Unfortunately, there are only about 35 of them throughout the country, and not all of them are operational. And the rest, services are provided by NGOs. Unfortunately, many women and children are reduced to sleeping on shelters, on the streets, if their shelters are full. There are vast rural areas where there's no support of any kind for women, so they have to fend for themselves. This is hardly what constitutionalism determines. Honourable Speaker, the abuse of the maintenance system has led to many single parents struggling to provide for their children, with the majority of victims being women. Since this limits the future opportunities of the children, the DA has taken the issue of maintenance on, and through negotiations with the Department of Trade and Industry, Justice, and the credit bureaus, we've been able to ensure stronger legislation to crack down on child maintenance defaulters and bring them to book. The Department of Justice has drafted a bill to enable credit bureaus to track down defaulters and ensure that they pay the maintenance or be blacklisted. It is vital that parents take their roles seriously and are held responsible for the upbringing of their children. The DA will also be initiating measures to improve the efficiency of the maintenance court. We celebrate the progress that has been made as a triumph for disadvantaged women in all corners of the country. Honourable Speaker, we've listened to the speeches of previous speakers, and I acknowledge that much has been achieved. But are we really free? Are we free to walk in the streets without fear of attack or rape? Do we have the freedom to allow our children to play in the streets outside their homes without fear of a stray bullet coming their way and killing or maiming them? Is our human rights culture really being maintained? Our Constitution is based on human rights. The blue sash which I wear today, reminiscent of the black sash worn by human rights activists in the days of apartheid, is a symbol of the DA's support for the many brave women of our past who dared to be seen in public, defying the unjust laws of this country. Women such as Helen Suzman, Helen Joseph, Molly Blackburn, Sophie de Bruyn, and Charlotte Bakeke, who reminded us of our unwavering strength as women in the face of adversity.
Yes, there's a point of order.
Speaker, on the issue of the participation of the people in the gallery, can it be controlled, please? Thank you.
Yes.
They're not supposed to participate. Thank you, sir.
No, that is true. Members who are in the gallery or our visitors who are very welcome are not supposed to be part of what's going on in the house because they are our guests. As far as we're concerned, we don't know whether they are ANC or COPE or what. We just know we have guests in the gallery who sit and observe the proceedings. Honorable member, please continue.
This sash bears testament to their struggles and salutes all women who struggled in the past. With this in mind, what is the vision of the Human Rights Commission in transforming the rights of women in South Africa and affording them the dignity they so deserve? Its mission is to support constitutional democracy through promoting, protecting, and monitoring the attainment of everyone's human rights without fear, favor, or prejudice. The values to be promoted are integrity, honesty, respect, equality, and the principles outlined by Batho Pele. But in the newspapers every day, we hear of a litany of crimes relating to abuse and neglect of little children and the elderly, to the brutal murder of women. At the weekend, an 83-year-old woman died after she was beaten and raped in the Sereni village outside Mikado. It was reported the gogo was left in the bushes, and then the perpetrators returned to her house and set it alight. The horror of this story is elevated by the fact that there were no arrests made for this unspeakable act. Honourable Speaker, I ask you, is this the image of a free South Africa that we had painted in our minds when the Women's Charter was drafted in 1954? Yet another horrific crime was reported last week. The brutal murder and rape of a lesbian woman in Ventersdorp. It's a blatant hate crime. Again, the horror of this story is made worse by the fact that this incident forms a plethora of similar instances in which the country is now worryingly desensitized. She was found dead on Friday with a wire around her neck and a hose pipe shoved down her throat. It's horrifying that members of South Africa's LGBTI community have to live and love in fear. Is government doing enough to protect LGBTI rights and rid South Africa of homophobia? Does our current constitution not guarantee the rights of minorities? Where are the values of tolerance, respect for life, and affording others the dignity that you would like for yourself? Honourable Speaker, in the very same month that we celebrate women, we also commemorate the victims of the Marikana tragedy. The horror and stark reality of Marikana is still pervasive. Not much has changed in the past 2 years. The women of Marikana not only suffered the loss of their husbands and breadwinners, but they're still living without water or decent housing. A widow who spoke on Saturday at the memorial said that she'd not received any compensation, that she had no money, and that, like her family in the Eastern Cape, she had received no support apart from NGOs. Where is the accountability of government and business? How ironic that in this month, when women are to be honoured, many still suffer at the hands of the new government, a government which is tasked with giving them their freedom. The sad, worn faces of the women of Marikana reflect the tragedy of a situation when the human rights culture of our constitution, the Ubuntu, was forgotten. Despite the enormous gains made by African women, gender equality remains an elusive goal. Efforts are frustrated by interpretations of societal norms and values rooted deeply in patriarchal structures and mindsets. They cannot simply be abandoned after 20 years of so-called freedom. This is not the life reflected in the Constitution. Speaker, may I please request that all the members stand for a moment in respect of all the tragic deaths that have occurred and in sympathy with the victims of crime and abuse. Thank you. May we, as legislators, May we, as legislators, even
On a
those who
point of
didn't
order, Chair.
stand, resolve to strengthen the
On a point of
oversight and implementation of
There's
the
a
laws we
point of
write.
order.
Chair, I want to check if a speaker can order members of the House. Sorry. Without your permission, Chair. Because if you allow, okay, request. Can a member request members of the House to rise without your permission, Chair? Because if that practice is allowed, it's going to render you useless there. We must be able to do it through you, Comrade Chair. Thank you.
I think come back with a ruling on that particular
Thank you.
matter. Yes, Honorable.
Thank you, Speaker.
Sorry, Honorable Member, Honorable Sisulu.
Honorable Speaker, I'd like to draw your attention to a precedent in this House where the Honorable Mangosuthu asked all the men to stand up, and we objected to that, and the Speaker ruled that it was out of order.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll take that all
Speaker.
into account.
Speaker, if I may
Yes,
correct the
Honourable
Honourable
Waters.
Minister, and she would know this, Honourable Minister, is that people objected because it was only for men and not for women. And I think it was the Honourable
Okay,
Minister Pandor
Honorable
that objected.
Waters, we are now getting into an all-out debate on this interesting question, but let's do that when I come back. Honorable
Right.
Robinson, please.
Thank you, Speaker. Honourable members and members in the gallery, even if those honourable visitors in the gallery, and you are so welcome, may we, as legislators, whether we stood up or not, resolve to strengthen the oversight and implementation of the laws we write, so that ours can be a just society based on the rule of law and a human rights-based constitution. We owe this to the many women who fought for gender equality in South Africa, and we owe it to the women who call a free South Africa their home. Ndiyabulela, enkosi kakhulu. Thank you.
Honorable Mweniso. May I repeat and address myself to our guests in the gallery? We yet again appeal to you not to participate in the activities.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. As EFF, we are taking this opportunity to speak about 3 categories of women. Women in domestic workers, women in rural areas, women without jobs. But before we do that, we'd like to dedicate this speech to Mama Winnie Nomzamo Madikizela Mandela. In paying tribute to the 1956 generation, we felt that it is important that we honor her and other courageous women in South Africa. She was arrested several times by the apartheid system, and in 1976, after Soweto uprising, where hundreds of students were killed, she was forced by the government to relocate to Brantford. She was then placed under house arrest in 1977. Her contribution in the fight against apartheid is our motivation as women. She continues to be the epitome of 1956 generation. All her life, she was fighting for the injustices against women. In everything that we do, we seek to be exactly like her. We are truly inspired by her deeds and her commitment of fighting for the rights of women. The media had tried, as well as the cruel system of apartheid, to destroy her, but she remained resolute and resilient in the fight against unjust laws, especially against women. Majority of domestic workers are separated from their homes to go and work as domestic workers. Domestic workers are still subjected to low wage income. Domestic workers do not have medical aids, but employers afford to pay medical aids for their dogs to take them to the vets. Domestic workers are not registered as permanent employees and not having UIF and pension fund. We should hold our Department of Labor responsible. Domestic workers work under appalling conditions and are subjected to abuse by their employers to such an extent that they get sexually harassed. And they would not complain because that puts the food on their table. Domestic workers earn very little, and such that they are unable to sustain their livelihood. And most of you as parliamentarians, you spend money on a bottle of whiskey rather than paying a decent salary for your domestic worker.
Order, order, honorable members.
It's the truth and it's a fact. You go consult with your constituencies, you will find this truth. It's sad. You should be ashamed of yourselves.
Order, order, honorable members. Honorable Minister, is that a point of order?
It certainly is, Honorable Speaker. As a Muslim and a person who does not touch alcohol at all, I do not spend a cent on whiskey. So I would ask the honorable member to say some of you. Thank you.
Order, honorable members. Honorable members, order. Honorable member on the podium, did you refer to all the members as spending money on alcohol? Because if you did, you need to ensure that you do not have a blanket approach to members of this honorable house, and therefore do clarify your statement by indicating that some members of the house.
Honorable Speaker, some members of this house.
Thank you very much. Order, honorable members. Order, honorable members. This is a very important debate on the issues affecting women. Please, let's not divert it into a session of just joking. Please proceed, honorable member.
Enkosi Mhlali ngaphambili. The duty of this parliament must to resolve the minimum wage of domestic workers and implementation thereof. This is what Mama Winnie has been fighting for and fought for. Speaker, we also want to take this opportunity to highlight the plight of women in rural areas and farmers. Women in rural areas do not have access to land for subsistence farming to be able to sustain their livelihoods. Women in rural areas are not allowed to own farms or to own land. Kusekho amakhosi abaxelela uba umfazi akakwazi ukwenza umhlaba. Women in rural areas have no access to proper health care situated closer to their localities. And therefore women, they still give birth under the trees and on the sides of the roads on their way to hospitals. It happened in Tsofimvaba. You want to know where? Rape cases are not being reported and they are not successfully prosecuted. Reason being, The healthcare facilities are so far away that the women, they choose to stay at home and not go to the clinics. Therefore, evidence becomes unavailable to successfully prosecute cases of rape. Women in rural areas do not have access to water and thus forces them to fetch water from rivers that are kilometers away from their homes. And the recent case of Nom Samatebula in Phalaborwa in Limpopo, who was raped and brutally killed on her way from fetching water in the river. May her soul rest in peace. Rural women and farm workers do not have access to hygienic basic needs like sanitary towels. How hard can it be to distribute sanitary towels if government can be in a position to buy so many condoms in all varieties? How hard can it be to give free sanitary towels? A sad story of Utumeka, who is there in the gallery, living in Khayelitsha, who works in the farms. She shared with us in our women's event that she has to resort to use papers and old clothes, which subjects her to humiliation in so much that she cannot find herself working in the farms anymore. She has to change over and over in front of men because there are no facilities in the farms where she can use a bathroom, or there are no sanitary towels for her to at least keep some time in a sanitary towel.
Honorable Speaker,
Yes, honorable member.
is the member ready to take a question?
If you allocate me enough time, I will take your question.
Does it therefore mean I can actually ask?
No, you can't. I have limited time.
She's left with 2 minutes.
If Utumeka was paid a decent salary, she would also be in a position to afford to buy her own sanitary towels. There are no proper facilities in farms, and there is no proper supervision in terms of occupational health and safety. And that goes against the benefit and the right of women working in farms. This parliament has to speedily look at the implementation of minimum wage to farm workers that have been promised about 2 years ago, but it's not happening. This parliament has to speedily look into the implementation of safety and security measures in the farms. This is what would please Mama Winnie and other progressive South African women. The last group of women we want to talk about is women of South Africa that have no income. Women have the burden of raising their children on their own because some men refuse to pay maintenance for their children. We urge all men out there to take responsibility and pay maintenance for their children. It is the right thing to do and a very good story to tell. Children do not have to be punished for the differences of their parents. Women are also forced into prostitution because of lack of employment. Young women with no income fall prey into sexual abuse by the so-called sugar daddies. The sugar daddies that promise them money and other material benefits and introduce them to flashy lifestyles that lead them to infections and HIV and AIDS and other very, very serious deadly diseases.
Honorable
There is
member.
no moral and political will to address the challenges women are facing in South Africa. As EFF, we believe that there is a correlation between women's rights and good governance. Mama Winnie, I'm sure would like to see the
Honorable member, your
empowerment
time
of
has
women
expired.
that encourages good global citizenship. Thank you.
The Honorable, the Premier of the Northern Cape.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. First of all, let me express my appreciation to be standing here, having the same privileges as Honorable Robinson, and to be here to commemorate and celebrate the women of South Africa. First of all, let me begin to say that sometimes if we stand up here, we must be able to be sure that we have the facts of things that we are raising. And when I'm saying that, I just want to mention for the
Honorable Speaker.
information.
Honorable Speaker, is the Speaker Premier willing to take a question? Are you going to buy Kentucky tonight, Speaker?
The
Verfeela.
Honorable Premier has hardly said anything. So I don't know on what basis would you base your
The
question.
ANC government has
Honorable,
long ago determined a minimum wage for domestic workers as well as the payment of unemployed insurance fund. Let us continue, Honorable Speaker, honorable members. When we celebrate and commemorate Women's Month, let us pay tribute to the valiant struggle of many resolute women of our country and to the lives of countless other women who have made great sacrifices, who embarked upon meaningful endeavors and torn down historical artificial barriers of prejudice. We are inspired by the 20,000 strong women who marched to the Union buildings in 1956 to present their petition in defiance against the apartheid and repressive laws. If we can mention a few of those brave women with visionary leadership, such as Lillian Ngoyi, Helen Joseph, Rahima Musa, and Sophie Williams the Brain, to name but a few, who braved the might of the repressive apartheid junta. We have to keep alight the flame of hope and progress that these revolutionary women have ignited. We are forever indebted to these women who have fought and provided us with leadership towards equality. Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Speaker, as women, we are pioneering the future. It is imperative that we study the incredible women of our past who inspired us and provided us with examples of how to make a difference. As we mark the 60th anniversary of the Women's Charter and 20 years of democracy, we will work hard to ensure that these heroines of South Africa are recognized and celebrated in our schools, in our workplaces, and communities throughout our country. We can say that in many areas of life, women now enjoy more fully their rights to education, to healthcare and inclusion in the workplace and societies at large. However, we acknowledge that vast inequalities still persist. As the democratic government, Honorable Speaker, we inherited a dispensation wherein which a very limited culture of rights and human rights for women existed. The democratic government had to virtually develop a total new legislative framework within which the rights of women could be addressed. And there is a few examples that we can mention. And it is the Domestic Violence Act of 1998, the Maintenance Act of 1998, as well as the Gender Equality Act. Through these and other acts, the rights of women and children in South Africa is guaranteed. It is also within this framework that Chapter 9 institutions like the Commission on Gender Rights has been established. The South African government also subscribes to different international treaties. Example, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW, as it is commonly known. A convention adopted by the United Nations to ensure that the rights of women is respected as human rights. South Africa also participated in the 4th World Conference on Women, where the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action has been adopted. South Africa also subsequently attended the conferences in terms of the Beijing Platform for Action. We are also one of the countries that subscribe to the 8 Millennium Development Goals, which will, if achieved, definitely have a very positive impact on the lives of women and children. On the countdown of 500 days to the achievement, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, confirms as follows: that inequality remains a challenge, as does the issue of childbirth, maternal mortality, universal education, and environmental sustainability. In spite of these challenges, we are extremely grateful for the significant strides that government has made over 20 years of democracy to improve the socio-economic and political standing of women in our country. Our government is on course to attain the noble goal of uniting our country to build a non-racial, non-sexist, and democratic South Africa. Our government is the one that repealed all the racist, repressive, and discriminatory laws that undermine the dignity and integrity of women to ensure that women realize their full potential. Honorable Speaker, in honor of the heroines of our struggle, we will continue to deepen the active and full participation of women in all spheres of government. Active participation in the economy, such as the agricultural sector, construction industry, as well as the green economy. It will ensure ownership by women of capacity building, management and control of diverse spheres of the economy, including manufacturing, insurance, construction, and transportation. Tapping into existing expertise in these fields, harnessing talent, and forming structures that can lobby and access capital are the best ways to create greater participation in the economy. The potential of women to contribute to economic growth and prosperity, to social progress, to peace, and to good governance is still untapped in too many areas in our society. Gender-based violence do not only destroy the lives of girls and women, it also robs our world of the talent, initiative, and dedication we urgently need, creativity, and intelligence to make monumental changes in themselves, their communities, and their country. As the Northern Cape government, we have launched a trust, the Mare Katusa Women's Development Trust, with the main aim to alleviate poverty levels in our province. This trust was formed to assist previously disadvantaged women on economic empowerment initiatives throughout all the 5 districts of our province. To this end, the trust has businesses effectively. We have pledged as a province to prioritize and mainstream women's socio-economic empowerment and women's rights across all sectors of society in the next 5 years. Loans to qualifying women, and of which we gave business training to women, and after that we will give them grants for their own business initiatives. And with sectors of fashion design, transportation, services and hospitality, yes, also together with the National Department of Housing, Provincial Department of Housing, as well as Solplaiki Municipality, hosted the Women's Build program in China Square in Galeshewe.
Order, honorable members. I now call upon Honorable S.J. Nkomo from the IF.
The birth of the Federation of the South African Women, FEDSO, in 1954, with an estimated membership of about 200 women, of 200,000 women around South Africa, marked the beginning of a strongly organized women's movement. The impact of the organization on our country showed how the strength of women can inspire a nation. On the 27th of October 1955, FEDSO was leading the charge, limited in our perspective. However, because when we look back at what women accomplished in this country, it did not just happen in one day. Many events took place before and after the march. Our children, especially our young girls, must know that when women join forces with a common vision, they can reshape the history of the nation. After all, Honorable Speaker, members, women hold half the sky. As we celebrate the 60th anniversary of the Women's Charter and 20 years of the democratic freedom, we must acknowledge the fact that South Africa has one of the strongest legal frameworks in helping to transform gender relations. The March of 1956 by the women of South Africa paved the way for the recent, current, and future generations of women to not only help build this country, but also take advantage of the many opportunities that were once the sole realm of men. Despite many advances and improvement in gender relations, we also must concede that laws cannot force attitudes home, which can compromise their schooling, as they are expected to also guide to the fact that the husband or partner works. Most, if not all, the widows are struggling to survive. They have nothing shielding them from sliding into being classified as poverty-stricken. And the IFP would like to actually state in this House that we acknowledge that legitimate self-enrichment because of the patriarchy 1956 and how women have helped advance our society. Yet every year, are responsible for not helping others in domestic and relations abuse situation. This must change. For instance, Honorable Speaker, I visited a ward in KwaZulu-Natal. Time they had water was on the 7th of May 2014. They do not have water up to now. Boys and
Honorable the Deputy Minister of Science and Technology and leader of the NFP.
Africa celebrates 20 years of democracy. The country has also reached another milestone by celebrating the 60th anniversary of the Women's Charter. One must agree, Honorable Speaker, that indeed a lot has been strength, resilience, and achievements. We must pay homage to the women of our nation who fought tirelessly at the public sector. Reveals this, but 2% down from last year's study, and this is posing a serious challenge. Those who are in senior positions, especially those who have played inequality and underdevelopment, but they continue to strive to ensure economic and food security for their families. Political and socio-economic conditions of communities, and therefore impacts on the overall quality of life. Socio-economic development and level of services are inaccessible due to costs, for example, water, electricity, proper housing, etc. Violence against women is the most pressing, life-threatening, and shocking danger that women face in South Africa. Young girls and women, especially elderly women, continue to live in perpetual fear for their lives because of the high levels of rape and killings. Statistics indicate that in South Africa, someone gets raped in every 4 minutes. Only 66,196 incidents were reported to the police last year only. Their investigations led to only 4,500 convictions. This is shocking and totally unacceptable. The rate of murders of women is equally troubling. The study by South African Medical Research Council reveals that a woman is killed by an intimate partner every 8 hours in South Africa. In most cases, These are vulnerable women that do not have a secured places. The NFP believes that there should be more places of safety built for vulnerable children and elderly women who do not have families looking after. Perpetrators of these heinous crimes must be
Honourable
arrested.
Deputy Minister, please round up.
Perpetrators of these heinous crimes must be arrested and not given bail and rot in jail. In the face of all these adversities, women continue to achieve success and make invaluable contributions in our country and society. We women, we must continue to display female solidarity and inner fortitude to work together and inspire one another to be the best wherever we are placed to serve our country. The NFP salutes and pay tribute to all women of South Africa. I thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. The Honourable C. N. Majeke.
Honorable Speaker, Ministers and Deputy Ministers, honorable members. The United Democratic Movement joins millions of citizens of the country and the world in paying tribute to the women of South Africa for the central role they continue to play in liberating this country. These heroines acted as a conscious and formidable force of the liberation struggle, even sacrificing their lives for freedom. Accordingly, any process which undermines the full emancipation of women is fundamentally hostile to the objectives of moving a non-racial, non-sexist South Africa forward. In this regard, and as this Parliament, together with the people of South Africa, it is important to answer the question whether we have made and continue to make progress with regard to the issue of the emancipation and empowerment of women. We must continuously measure the progress we are making in this area so that we can determine what we should do next to improve the situation of women. There is no doubt that some progress has been made on women emancipation and empowerment, in particular in the public sector. On this important day that celebrates our heroines, we make a call on the corporate world to meaningfully join the movement towards a non-sexist society. Certainly, it is not possible to realize our full economical potential with women on the margins of economic development agenda and process. Honorable Speaker, the empowerment of women does not only relate to high positions in the public and private sector. It must, amongst others, mean that the ordinary woman in the rural areas is freed from the daily arduous and back-breaking task of walking long distance to fetch wood and carry river water, still happening in some areas where water is not coming out, despite the fact that installation of taps has taken place, but water still does not come out. The ordinary rural woman should be freed from abusive stereocultural practices that undermine their humanity and freedom. This emancipation must mean we make the necessary progress to arm women with education, skills, and information so that they can participate meaningfully in the economic and social development opportunities that are available in our country. Government should, amongst others, strengthen its tender processes so that through its interventions, visible change in the lives of ordinary South African women is seen. Both the public and private sector should source their services and products from women and businesses that are owned and managed by women, taking the necessary measures to promote, mentor, and empower business women. The commitment by government to buy local must deliberately favor women. Government must engage both trade unions and employers to act together to bring to an end the continuing sexual abuse of working women at the workplaces, as well as those seeking employment. Women's rights must be protected if we are to decisively move a non-racial and non-sexist South Africa forward. As this Parliament and the nation, we have a responsibility and duty to unite against the barbaric acts of rape and abuse of women and children. We must ask ourselves, what happened to Ubuntu when these inhuman things happen amongst us? We should not shirk our responsibilities by ignoring the abuse of women and children on the basis that it is the task of the police to deal with these matters. We must decisively discharge our responsibilities within the confines of law. We also need to pay more and special attention to the challenge of gender and women who are handicapped as they face a double jeopardy. This applies to young and old. This is important because we sometimes find that women who are handicapped are open to more abuse than other women. The task of women empowerment and emancipation demands that South Africans increase their collaboration in moving a non-sexist South Africa forward. Indeed, by doing all these things together, we will perfectly celebrate the 60th anniversary of the Women's Charter and 20 years of freedom, whilst moving a non-racial and non-South Africa forward. I thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. The Honorable Mulder. You are protected, Honorable Mulder.
Thank you, sir. I cannot change my birth, sir. Speaker, Chairman, in the past, in most conflicts, it was women and children that suffered the most. A few kilometers outside Bloemfontein, a traveler will find the National Women's Monument. The monument was unveiled in 1913 to commemorate those Boer women and children who died in British concentration camps during the war. You know, for every man that was killed on the battlefield during that war, 9 women and children died in the concentration camps. At the monument, the suffering of black women and children during the war is also acknowledged. For 80 years, the Bloemfontein's Women Monument remained the only national monument in the world dedicated solely to women and children. That was until 1993, when the Vietnam Women's Memorial, which adjoins the memorial wall, was unveiled in Washington, D.C. There are a great many monuments and memorials around the world which have women as primary focus. But for 80 years, none except the monument outside Bloemfontein had national status. So I invite members to visit the monument with me. On either side of the center obelisk, 2 bronze friezes depict women and children suffering. On the one side, you see women and children and their few belongings on their way to the camps. They were mostly transported in open rail carriages used for transporting cattle. On the other side, the frieze depicts a company of women and children solemnly watching the death of a child in a camp tent. Mevrou, in enige stryd is vroue en kinders gewoonlik die wat die swaarste kry, het ek gesê. Interessant, by die voortrekmonument wat in die 30er jare van die vorige eeu ontwerp is, het die argitek ook besluit om 'n vrouefiguur as sentrale figuur voor die monument te plaas uit erkenning vir die belangrike rol wat vroue gespeel het. Die verlede is belangrik en ons durf dit nie vergeet nie. Tog is dit ons taak om besluite te neem vir die hede en nie net die verlede nie. Ons moet besluite te neem wat verhoed dat die verlede herhaal word en dat Suid-Afrika nou beter moet gaan met vroue en kinders as in die verlede. Ongelukkig is vroue vandag weer dikwels die slagoffers van geweld in ons samelewing. In Suid-Afrika word daagliks ongeveer 150 vroue verkragt. Dis omtrent 1 vrou elke 10 minute. In plaasmoorde en ander rooftogte skiet die misdadigers dikwels die man dood. Die gevolg is dat daar tans duisende vroue slagoffers in Suid-Afrika agterbly wat die trauma en die probleme wat so 'n moord veroorsaak het, moet hanteer. So moet die ma van Tiger en Morris tans die trauma verwerk van haar kind, wat dood is, naai agter 'n motor aangesleep is. Hoe wreed kan mens wees? Mevrou, ons het 'n padongelukke fonds wat help om die slagoffers van padongelukke by te staan. Is dit nie moontlik om iets soortgelyks vir die onskuldige slagoffers van misdaad in Suid-Afrika te vestig nie, veral dan die vroue? Waarom kan ons dit nie ook doen nie? Dit alleen, wat my betref, as ons daarin sal slaag, sal hulle groot bydrae maak om die posisie van vroue in Suid-Afrika in die toekoms te verbeter. Ek dank u.
Dankie, agbare lid. Die Councillor Ntingane.
Honorable Chairperson of the NCOP, Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, honorable members, distinguished guests. The 9th of August 2014 marked a historic day when South Africans commemorated the Women's Month under the theme, celebrating the 60th anniversary of Women's Charter and 20 years of freedom, moving women's agenda forward. The 60-year journey since the adoption of the Women's Charter of the 17th of April 1954 correctly gives rise to a triumphant celebration. This milestone comes at a time when South Africa looks back to 20 years after the adoption of the Women's Charter for Effective Equality of 1994 and 20 years after the advent of democracy and freedom, respectively. South Africa has made significant legislative reforms and developed policies and programs based on the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa and its Bill of Rights, which seek to promote and protect women's rights in the home, community, and in the workplace. It is within this context that we continue to analyze the progress made in achieving gender equality and the empowerment of women in South Africa. The celebration of the 2014 National Women's Month is also the beginning of the discourse and engagement in taking stock of the challenges that still persist in attaining women's empowerment and gender equality. This calls for us to celebrate on battles won and envision a substantial war to conquer in respect of further entrenching the transformation agenda on women's socio-economic empowerment, rights, and equality. We have made great strides at SALGA in the fight for gender equality, and this includes, Madam Chair, the establishment of SALGA Women's Commission, which seeks to ensure that gender mainstreaming and women issues are in particular, receive adequate and effective attention at local government level in both policy and practice. It is similarly imperative that as SALGA we continue to reflect on the current status of representation and participation of women in the local sphere of government as we prepare for the 2016 local government elections. The annual gathering of SALGA Women's Commission Lekgotla, to be convened in November of 2014, will provide a platform and opportunity to reflect and review on the achievements and challenges experienced by women, review progress made in the implementation of gender equality and empowerment measures for women, and celebrate the achievements to gender equality in local government. A non-sexist society is one in which there's no discrimination in any form on the basis of sex. At local government, we strive to ensure that all members of society are afforded opportunities, facilities, and resources without regard of their gender. This means that policies and practices relating to citizens must be able to meet the needs of all men, women, girls, and boys within communities. I would like to extend our best wishes to all women for a happy Women's Month, as we all agree that women are the agents of change and the backbone of our society. And having said that, one would like to isolate here women such as Albertina Sisulu, who led the Committee of 10 in Johannesburg to make sure that today we have a local government that is representative of all women of this country. Wathinta bafazi.
Thank you, Councillor. The Honorable Tarabella Machesi.
Honorable Speaker, while South African women were busy celebrating Women's Day on the 8th of August, Mantombi Musase, a woman from Qwaqwa, sustained severe burns and severely beaten. This was all at the hands of her boyfriend. He locked her up for 2 days before she was rescued by the local police. She sustained various injuries throughout her body, including her private parts. She was attacked purely because she demanded child maintenance from her boyfriend. Honorable Speaker, This highlights the extent of ongoing daily violence against women and gender equality in South Africa. Although we can proudly say that we've made some great strides, even though today I see the Honorable from the EFF, Honorable Munda, being the one that is debating, I wonder if he doesn't have women in his party.
Order. Order, Speaker.
The FF plus.
A point of order,
On a
ma'am.
point of
Honorable
order.
Minister.
It's not a point of order, Madam Speaker. I just want to find out if the honorable member can take a question because it's not women that have to speak on women's issues.
Ma'am, do you want to take the question?
No, I'm not going to take any question. But I just wanted to say, I was just asking if he doesn't have representatives. That's all. It was just a question.
Thank you, ma'am. But perhaps you should be reflecting. The Honorable Mulder is a member of the Freedom Front Plus, not the EFF.
Yes, I did. I
Please
said
continue.
the Freedom Front Plus. Okay.
Please continue.
Okay, Honorable Speaker, we cannot fully celebrate yet if women like Mantombi are physically abused and 3 women end up killed every day in the hands of those who are supposed to protect them. We cannot fully celebrate until great strides have been made in equipping women with many of the necessary skills they need to access employment and improve their quality of life while contributing to our economy. We cannot fully celebrate when in the last 3 years, 300 teachers were being charged with sexually abusing girls at school. Honorable Speaker, we cannot fully celebrate yet if women cannot support their families and still go to bed with empty stomachs. We cannot fully celebrate yet if human trafficking is now rife, particularly in Harrismith, Free State, which has become a hotspot where women and children are trafficked for the sole purpose of sexual exploitation, drugs, and an alarming new trend of parents who are selling their children for prostitution. We cannot fully celebrate if the traditional practices like ukutwala still occur. This has become nothing but a practice of abducting young women and forcing them to marry older men. Violence against women and children is nothing short of an epidemic in our country. It poses a significant threat to human rights and development of women and children. It is clear that women suffer very high levels of sexual assault, rape, and domestic violence in this country. People cannot take advantage of opportunities if their lives are under siege, if their rights are not respected by their fellow citizens, or their visions is limited by fear. The right to equality is the right for all human beings to be treated with dignity, respect, and consideration, and to participate to an equitable basis. Enshrined, as you all know, deeply in our Constitution is the right to equality for women and men. However, we seem to lack the will to implement legislation that will guarantee effective legal protection against discrimination, harassment, and equal opportunity, and the legal means to promote equality, because gender inequality is deeply rooted and deeply entrenched in our attitudes, societal institutions, and also the marketplace. We need strong leadership, the political will and a commitment to institute the policies that can trigger meaningful social changes and to allocate the resources necessary for gender equality and women empowerment. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, bills such as the gender equality and women empowerment bills must be scrapped once and for all. This bill distracts us from the real issues, cannibalizing the constitutional mandate of the Commission for Gender Equality, a Chapter 9 institution. Besides overriding the mandate of the CGE, this bill only duplicates provisions in a host of other acts, including the promotion of equality and prevention of unfair discrimination, Employment Equity Act, the Basic Condition of Empowerment Act, the Broad-Based Economic Empowerment Act, and the Human Rights Commission Act. At the time when the Green Paper was produced, when it was being prepared, the minister who was to coordinate a comprehensive process for reviewing and assessing current legislation and policy. This never happened. Then the minister, Lulu Xingwane, was too busy squandering her department money and not addressing real transformation for women in this country. Honorable Chair, instead of introducing legislations, instead of introducing new legislation, there are a number of issues
There is a
which
point
need
of order,
to be
ma'am.
protested.
There is a point of order. Honorable Tidiza.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I'm not sure whether it would be parliamentary for the member to make an inference on a member who's not in parliament, but also make, without saying it's alleged, to actually be as specific as though the member has squandered resources.
Honorable Member, the point that is raised, I need to take advice on it. It would also help if it is an allegation that you actually mention that it is an allegation. Until I come back with a ruling, I think we must desist from labeling without evidence. Please continue. Please continue. Continue.
Okay. So, should I continue?
I said continue three times, Honorable Member.
Okay, Honorable Chair, instead of introducing new legislation, there are a number of issues which need to be prioritized. We need a comprehensive audit of existing legislation to identify where the gaps are. We must know why crucial pieces of legislations are not sufficiently implemented and what can be done to ensure that their objectives are realized. We must ensure that women, girls, and sexual minorities are protected from violence. Empowerment means nothing if people are scared to walk in the streets. We need to address the scourge of teenage pregnancy. Teenage pregnancy traps so many girls and their children in permanent dependency and degrading poverty, often accompanied by sexual violence. In conclusion, akukho ilizwe elingakwazi ukuthi maliphumele phambili ukuba ngaba alinyukeli ukuze liphumisele abantu abangabafazana phambili. Inkululeko ayinakufunyana ukuba ngaba abantu abangabafazana abakhululekanga. We must always remember the women who marched to the union buildings. They were women from all walks of life. They fought for this country and all who live in it. And we must continue to fight for the absolute freedom of women. Let us now engage real, meaningful ways to ensure that women fully participate and contribute to our economy, which needs all the help it can get. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. The Honorable Murutwa. Are you on a point of order, sir? Are you on a point of order?
Yes, I am, Madam Chairperson. I was just watching the line being broken, but anyway, that's fine. Madam Chairperson, I'd just like to say that when you do take into consideration the ruling that we're expecting from you now on that you do bear in mind that the member who was referred to is not a member of this House, and we must be very mindful not to infringe on the constitutional rights of members of this House to freedom of expression and freedom of speech.
I will take that into consideration. The members of the House are enabled by a number of instruments to have freedom of speech. One of those is the Powers, Privileges and Immunities Act. It protects members of this House only in as far as they are accurate and they are not slanderous, and they are not defamatory. And that is why the caution I made earlier on was to make sure that whatever you use and you say against a member in this house or outside this house, you are sure you have the facts. But thanks for the advice. That will be taken into consideration. Mem Rutwa?
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, honorable ministers and deputy ministers, honorable members of parliament and legislatures and SALGA, members of the public at large. My speech will be dedicated to stalwarts that led the 1913 campaign on land distribution, women of the Federation of South African Women, who launched the 1954 Charter, and also those women who marched to Pretoria in 1956, who called for the equality of women's rights. This Federation of South African Women was led by the ANC Women's League. The multi-party Women's Caucus is mandated to represent interests of women parliamentarians to promote the discussion of women's issues in Parliament. This entails the discussion and scrutiny of legislation and its implementation on the social conditions of women. I am impressed by the Deputy of Telecommunications and Postal, SAPO, and also the Department of Science and Technology for focusing on women in the ICT and also women in science and technology, which are very rare skills. Hence, in the 5th Parliament, we will be focusing on poverty in rural areas and the 20 years of democracy indicating what the ANC government is doing about the challenges. The underdevelopment of rural areas due to, amongst other, urban migration of young men in pursuit of employment opportunities has in the main had an adverse effect on rural women. In many cases, rural women are exposed to harsh conditions of poverty and hard labor in energy generation and collection of water. Many rural women are without security of tenure, as trust land held by traditional leaders is often distributed among gender lines in favor of males. Such conditions and other similar ones have a chilling effect on women's efforts to develop themselves and care for their dependents. It is therefore imperative not only to equalize opportunities and improve rural infrastructure, but also to configure rural resources allocation methods to respond to gender inequalities in a manner that seeks not only to eliminate them, but to empower rural women. The reality of the poverty of rural women imposes a normative duty on government and society in full of basic human rights to dignity and equality, to ensure that access to socio-economic rights by women is accelerated, for there can be no dignity, no equality in the midst of poverty and underdevelopment. In order to address challenges that face women in rural areas, there needs to be access to funding, training, transfer of technology, building partnerships, ensuring food security, to land as well as monitoring inequality in the distribution of land in order to address these conditions that these women are in. In terms of addressing women's economic and rural development, government has implemented several programs: the Agricultural Women Empowerment Program and the Agricultural Development Finance Program. Land care projects are responsible for empowering communities targeting women and children. The Micro Agricultural Finance Institution of South Africa, MAFISA, program benefited a large quantity of rural population. That majority of beneficiaries in these projects and programs were women. Mafisa is a government-supported financial scheme that aimed to increase productivity in farming and agribusiness operations. The Comprehensive and Agricultural Support Program, CASP, benefited a large quantity of rural people across the country. The majority of these were women. The Comprehensive Rural Development Program is aimed at creating sustainable rural communities throughout the country. The National Rural Youth Service Corps program aims to enhance skills development by providing unemployed youth in the rural areas with opportunities to work in their communities and to be trained to provide the necessary services for local socio-economic development. Women have benefited through both the Financial Assistance Land Administration, FALA, programs, and specifically through one of the projects, the Ngecha Farm projects. The overall goal of the project is to utilize the Ngecha land to create long-term sustainable economic opportunities and jobs in Ngecha and surroundings areas. The ANC has asserted in its 2014 National General Election Manifesto that it will continue to improve the tenure security, administration of people living in the communal areas, with emphasis on the security of tenure of women. South Africa has prioritized the empowerment of rural women through the mainstreaming of gender as part of a comprehensive rural development program. South Africa's Women Charter for Effective Equality states that women must have access to land, tenure rights, including women living under customary law. The Land Reform Gender Policy Framework emphasizes gender awareness on women's rights when it comes to land. It calls for the use of gender-sensitive methodologies in project cycles, socio-economic empowerment of women, and an integrated approach to gender issues. The National Development Plan sets out specific milestones with regards to how the condition of women in society in general ought to be transformed. The NDP maintains that it aims to broaden ownership of assets to historically disadvantaged groups, such as women and rural communities. It seeks to build an inclusive rural economy through increased direct and indirect jobs in agriculture, agro, processing, and related sectors. It calls for action that will help achieve security of tenure for women, communal farmers. The phenomenon of urban poverty as a consequence of inequalities and lack of employment is more pronounced amongst women who remain most vulnerable to negative economic conditions. Many urban women live in squalor and semi-developed conditions, mostly along the outskirts of cities and towns, and some in townships. Most are unemployed, whilst others either underemployed or engaged in informal trading or other survivalist business ventures aimed at consumption and minimum food security and access to household necessaries. It is therefore necessary that women owned a small business and cooperatives are not only encouraged, but are empowered and supported. Women are still facing challenges, even though South Africa has proven itself to be a pioneer in the emancipation of women on the global scale. It must be noted that South Africa has made strides in ensuring that women access economic opportunities and that the structural legacy of past policies is eradicated. However, more needs to be done to improve the conditions of women in the informal sector, to ensure that ultimately they grow their enterprises and gradually graduate to the formal sector. South Africa still has many women operating in the informal sector where they struggle to access resources such as finance, infrastructure, and ease of running business. Cheers. The EPWP is a nationwide program under the auspices of government and state-owned enterprises. It is aimed at drawing significant numbers of unemployed people into productive work, accompanied by training to increase their capacity to earn an income. The new growth path is aimed at enhancing growth, employment creation, and equity. Women today own enterprises and are active participants in the economy. We have more women playing leadership roles across various sectors and making inroads in various fields of the economy. The Human Settlements Department document, Vision 2030, on the road to 2050, states that there should no longer be poverty traps in rural and urban areas. It looks at eradicating backlogs of more than 2.1 million housing units, which translates to about 12.5 million people. The Bavumile Skills Development Program is a women's empowerment capacity building initiative aimed at identifying talent in the arts and crafts, the textiles and clothing sectors. It is a formal training program to develop women's expertise in the production of marketable goods and the creation of formal enterprises in the creative industry. Technology for women in business. The TWIB was introduced to accelerate women's economic empowerment and the development of women-owned enterprises through the recognition of technology-based business applications and systems, and to unlock constraints to enterprise innovation and growth as well as global competitiveness. South African Women Entrepreneurs Network, SAWEN, was established to fast-track support provided to women in addressing challenges faced when establishing, strengthening, and sustaining their enterprises. SAWEN is a membership organization with a mandate to represent and articulate the aspirations of all women, entrepreneurs who operate within the South African SMME sector. The empowerment of women begins with the empowerment of girl children, so that the future is invested in. It is thus impressive that South Africa has achieved high levels of enrollment by girls in primary, secondary, and tertiary education. We must also act to protect vulnerable groups such as women, children, the elderly, and persons with disabilities from violence. Interventions should be initiated to deal with the causes of widespread violence in our communities, including and inequality. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, ma'am. The Honorable Lekota.
Thank you, Chairperson of the Council of Provinces. My dear friends, we today celebrate the women of our country who have made outstanding contributions in advancing our country. After the 1913 Land Acts, African women of the Free State were compelled to take the passes. They refused. Started a campaign that ran from 1913 to 1999. It is the only past campaign, as far as I am aware, that was fought and defeated the regime. But the most important thing linked to this is that as the black women were organizing against for the campaign, there was a group of white women, Afrikaner women in the main, who, because the northern provinces of the Free State and the Transvaal did not allow African children schooling, they organized their husbands and pressurized them to contribute pieces of land so that they could construct schools and so that rural children could go to school. My mother started her education in such a school called Susana between Ventersburg and Senegal. That school had been completed in 1919. When I started school, I started at Susana until I got to Standard 4, which was the highest class you could go to. And Susana is still there as I speak to you. The building, the remnants of the buildings are there. Mr. and Mrs. Malan's grandchildren have now got their piece of land back since we set government to do that. This group of women, these women organizing for the cause, made this contribution. And then, of course, there is an important example I also want to remind you of. When the blacks were removed from the voters' roll in the old times, among other things, some white women organized themselves to mourn this thing. And they call themselves the Black Sash. They made it a campaign to organize and assist especially the African communities, to fight the past laws. Sheena Duncan was one of the outstanding examples of that. When I got to Robben Island as a prisoner alongside my comrades, some of whom are here amongst you and so on, we were under very severe conditions. This is serious. And there was one woman who was a member of parliament in this house. She constantly visited there. She looked how we were looking at, and she'd come here and she'd rise here and object to the treatment President Mandela and all of us were getting there. She would be shouted down by the majority. Her name was Helen Suzman. We celebrate the women of our country. Let's celebrate the women of our country. Those who said, Sheena Duncan, Mrs. Malan was the lady who started that school I was talking about, where me and my mother, Susana is the name of the school. Matlaega, the first woman leader from the black communities in the women's section of the ANC, then, of course, the Women's League was not there then, but in the women, Suzanne McClark, she was part of that. Charlotte McClark, those women is what I'm talking about. I don't have much time to go into that. I'm just saying to you, it's a much longer history than fighting about little bits and pieces here. You have to look at the broad picture of where South Africa has traveled to get where it is. And I'm very proud that I have put it on the Hansard of the country so that you can refer and go and read. Please, chase that history. We mustn't allow it to go down. And so the women of our country, young and old, must take these examples, confront the situations of Khayelitsha, of Deep Sloot, of Olivenhout Bush, and say, what can we do to follow this, supported by ourselves?
Honorable Lekota, your time has expired. The Honorable Mateis.
Honourable Speaker, EFF's Honourable Veronica has just highlighted the horrific plight of women, 3 sets of women, or women in 3 sectors rather, domestic workers, and I just want to make a comment on domestic workers. We have a minimum wage of 1,877 rand and 70 cents per annum, and this varies depending geographically. Per month, sorry, you're right. EFF has proposed that domestic workers should receive a minimum wage of 3,500. And not only have we proposed this, you see, our worker who works in our office receives her salary every month, 3,500. The second, she highlighted the plight of women in rural areas and also the 27% of unemployed women in our country, and that, mind you, is 3.3% higher than men. Now, I'm going to highlight the plight of women in the mining sector. I forgot my hard cap in the office, unfortunately, but I am dressed appropriately. On the 16th of August 2014, and that was less than a week ago, I was part of the thousands of caring South Africans who commemorated the mine workers who were massacred in Marikana. My heart remains deeply pained from my interactions with the widows of Marikana, whose husbands were brutally killed by a police force which was supposed to protect them. In a study in the late 2012, the Benchmarks Foundation released a sobering report on the harassment, the violence, the discrimination faced by women in the mining sector. The report urged the government to investigate the conditions of women in the mining sector. But it appears as if little has been done. Rape, sexual assault, physical abuse, and it continues to be the order of the day. There really has been no genuine effort to address the dire, the unequal, and often horrendous and dangerous working conditions of women mine workers are subjected to in their brave and desperate attempt to provide for their families. The vulnerability of the working class women is captured in the daily struggles of women mine workers. Women who are spouses or who are the spouses of mine workers who are not excluded, I beg your pardon. The women who are spouses of the mine workers are not excluded from the suffering. Beyond the social conditions, they lose their husbands too. They lose them to death because of TB, and death because of protests for fair and decent wages. 34 families don't have a breadwinner today and have not had one for 2 years because the police force opened fire and killed them, and many of them with more than 10 bullets each. How do we speak of a glorious woman emancipation in South Africa? How do we speak about all these conferences we have hosted, yet we have not attended to the widows of Marikana? We had a police force that killed their husbands, a government that buried them, and then what? Then the economic freedom fighter steps in and truly understands what the emancipation of women is, and in the limited way that we possibly can. You see, we will build houses for the widows of Marikana. We will pay their school fees. We will buy water tanks because, unfortunately, the piping and providing proper water is a bit outside of what we can do at the moment. And we will provide practical assistance to all those widows of Marikana. We can say with certainty and conviction that at the next women's debate, the 4 children of Nolundi Tezuka will be attending school with new uniforms, school supplies, and food. Matabang from the Free State will have decent, spacious houses with proper sanitation. The EFF is not in government yet, but be assured, we are a government in waiting, yet we have started rolling out programs to practically change the lives of our people.
Honourable
And we will
Matthys,
achieve
your
this,
time has
and we will
expired.
achieve it in our lifetime.
Thank you, ma'am. The Honourable Dudley.
Thank you, Chair. During the Take a School Child to Work campaign in May, our president heard for himself the anxiety experienced by South Africa's young women over the Boko Haram abductions in Nigeria. This anxiety has been significantly heightened by reports of beheaded women and children by the terrorist army Islamic State, or ISIS in Iraq. One young woman asked you, Mr. President, in your absence, what you would do if schoolgirls were abducted in South Africa, as they have been in Nigeria. Your response was exactly what we wanted to hear. We would never sleep, we would look for you until we find you, you said. The problem is actions speak louder than words, and more than 200 of the 300 Christian girls are still missing, and Boko Haram continues to abduct. 100 men and boys were taken this week in northeast Nigeria. Husbands, sons, brothers, women are acutely affected by this tragic and terrifying loss. The ACDP applauds the actions of troops from Chad that rescued 85 of these men and boys. People are asking what we in South Africa are doing. Are we saying enough? Are we doing enough? Are we engaging at any level in order to help get the abducted girls safely back, or to ensure the safety of people under attack in Iraq? The Archbishop of Canterbury has expressed very grave concern about the violence in Iraq, calling for reassurance that the commitment to religious freedom will remain a priority for the UK government. This reassurance is also needed in South Africa. While Islamic extremists have not hidden their intention to impose Sharia law globally, who would have thought this would be taking place so blatantly in the capitals of the world like London, Paris, and Brussels? Now, these are not arbitrary uprisings, but long-planned coups backed by an increasingly well-developed Islamic economic system. The Archbishop has called for the appointment of an ambassador at large for international religious freedom to demonstrate government's serious commitment to developing an overarching strategy against Islamist extremism and violence as it is developing across the globe. The Women's Charter calls on us to strive for permanent peace throughout the world. Our words must loudly and clearly condemn attacks on women, on their children, and on their men, and condemn attacks on their freedoms. Presently in Iraq, people are being given the option to convert, pay a fine, or die. But even this is a lie, as local reporters say the reality is convert or die. Now, Mr. President, the ACDP is calling on you to rethink your comment that such things as abductions happen under certain circumstances, but not in South Africa. Such circumstances would never happen, you say. We are concerned that your confidence ignores the realities. The ANC's blanket approval of and support of the Islamic extremist terrorist group Hamas will not always shield us. For now, yes, but the day will come when the shocking realities will be within our borders, and when we say no, there will be no mercy. Our own freedom of religion will not hold up on its own. If we stand by while global terrorism destroys freedom of religion around the world, we will stand alone when we are under siege. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Before I take the next speaker, I wish to go back to the point of order which was made by the Honorable Didiza on the statement made by the Honorable Tarabella Machesi. And in particular, she was responding to an assertion made by the Honorable Tarabella that the former minister, Tlingwana, did or went to the effects that she did not do her work to pass the necessary policies and legislation because she was busy squandering money. The chief whip of the DA stood to say that we should be cautious when we come back on a ruling on this matter, because members of this House, and in fact members of Parliament, have the right to be protected and the right to freedom of speech. It is true that members of the House have the right to say whatever they have to say without fear. It is also true that members of the House are protected to say whatever it is that they have to say. It is also true that Section 25(1) of the Powers, Privileges and Immunities Act gives people who are members of the public or members of the communities who might not be in this House some protection. And I want to quote, because it says, a person other than a member who feels aggrieved by a statement or a remark made by a member or a witness in or before a House or a committee about that person may submit a written request to the secretary to have a response recorded. In other words, members of this House do not have a blanket check to say whatever they want about people who are not present to defend themselves. I would want to caution members of Parliament to always exercise caution, to deal with people who are away, who are outside, who are not protected in such a way that they do not end up finding recourse by taking the matters to other places to find recourse to protect themselves. I think that it is always important for members of Parliament to do the honorable thing. If it is an allegation, say it is an allegation. If you have proof, produce the proof. So that at all times, we do not use the shield and the mantra of having freedom of speech in the houses to actually say things that we know will not stand the test outside of this house. That is my ruling.
Madam Chairperson, may I ask a question in relation to that ruling? Because it's obviously going to set a precedent in this House. And I need to be clear on that precedent that you're setting. Are you saying in your ruling that the Powers and Privileges Act now supersedes Section 58 of the Constitution?
I am saying that members of Parliament are honorable members. I am saying that you have freedom of speech. I am also saying that members must be cautious not to infringe upon the right of the people who do not sit in this House, to say things about people who are not in this House to protect or to respond to their own names. It is a very simple conclusion, and I'm putting a caution to members.
Chair.
Honorable Malema.
I want to appreciate what you are saying on the basis of a common understanding that it is a caution and not a ruling. Yes. So that what we say here about other people and what other people want to do to us is our business with those people and not your business. Yes. So we can either accept your caution, which is a word of advice, but it should never be interpreted as a ruling, because the chief whip of the DA is right. If it's a ruling which we must live by, then we have a problem with that.
Honorable Malema, thank you very much. Honorable Ngakula.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. There are many variables that obviously come into this matter. And that being so, it is going to be important for us to understand what we are saying. Because you see, the problem with a debate of this kind is that in the first instance, it creates precedents. But in the second instance, it deals with people who will not find a recourse with respect to allegations that are made against them. Many of us know of a number of instances where someone stands up and that person makes an allegation. And it does not matter whether they preface it by saying, it is alleged. Because what then happens is that that allegation sits with that person for years. And Honorable Malema, I am sure you appreciate what I'm saying. That an allegation made against you...
Chairperson, is this a point of order?
It is a
or
point
a
of...
lecture from Honourable Member?
Please take your seat. Proceed, Honourable Ngakula.
Chairperson, I'm doing exactly what they did. They did not stand up on a point of order. They are arguing a case. And I'm doing the same, I'm arguing a case. But
Thank
I've
you.
made my case. Thank you very much.
Honorable members,
Madam Chairperson,
I didn't recognize you. Please take your seat.
I'm asking to be recognized.
Please take your seat. I will recognize you when I want to. The Honorable Chief Whip of the DA made reference to Section 58 of the Constitution, which talks to privilege. Section 58(1) says cabinet ministers, deputy ministers, and members of the National Assembly have freedom of speech in the Assembly and in its committees, subject to its rules and orders. Subject to its rules and orders. Subject to its rules and orders. The Powers and Privileges Immunities Act. The Powers and Privileges Act is one of those instruments which gives effect to. You will respect the chair. You will respect the chair.
Chairperson, you know, we're very worried. Chair.
Honorable Shibambo, I have not
Looks like
recognized
every time you come this side, you cause disorder here.
Honorable Shibambo, please take your
We've
seat.
been operating properly, and then you come from the other side, you cause disorder. The
Honorable
other time you
Shibambo,
cause
please
disorder.
take your
We're now
seat.
in court because of this thing. Please protect the integrity of this house, please. Man.
Honorable Shibambo, take your seat. Section 58 recognizes that this House is enabled and empowered to make its own orders and to make its own rules. It recognizes that. If it did not recognize that there will be instruments and rules and orders which this House would make, it would not have made reference to that. I have said that I caution members not to continuously make allegations, especially against members who do not sit in this House and therefore cannot stand and protect their own names. But we are not talking about Helen Zille.
Chairperson.
Where is the point of order?
Yeah. Chairperson, on a point of order, in fact, the member in question or the ex-minister in question, there is a public protector case that's currently being investigated against her, pertaining to allegations that the member has made. So I think what simply should have been said is that she should have said alleged transgressions or alleged squandering of money. I think it's as simple as that, really.
Honorable member, that is what we advised. That is what the Honorable Didiza stood up to say. Is it an allegation? State it is an allegation. It has not been proven. We repeat that by saying, unless you can produce proof, it is safer for members to refer to allegations.
Well, Chairperson, just to add that the member is not out of line by saying that those allegations are on the table, because in fact I had referred the matter to the public protector and it is being investigated.
Honorable member, that is not contested. We have cautioned the House. If there is a member or anybody who is not a member or anybody who is outside this House that you allege has done something, please accept that you are making an allegation. If there is a matter that is before an investigating body or before court or before the police, accept that it is there and that that matter will be referred to. Yes, Chief Whip of the ETA.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Madam Chairperson, I think we need to be very, very clear in the House because we really are treading on very cautious ground here. The Powers and Privileges of Parliament Act, and you didn't read Section 2 of the section number 2 of that Section 58, which says are not liable to civil or criminal proceedings, arrest, imprisonment, or damages for A, anything that they have said in, produced before, or submitted to the Assembly or any of its committees. And I'm quoting from Parliament's own Guide to Procedure. It says that the Constitution provides that other privileges and immunities of the Assembly, Cabinet members and members of the Assembly may be prescribed by national legislation. The Powers and Privileges of Parliament Act number 91 of 1963, which predates the Constitution and is valid to the extent, and this is the important part, is valid to the extent that it does not conflict with it, provides for this. So where the Powers and Privileges of Parliament Act infringes on Section 58, it is invalid.
What is the point that the honorable member is making? My ruling in no way infringes on the right of members of this House. It says that members must be circumspect, they must be cautious in what they are saying. It says that, and we must reiterate that, in fact, freedom of speech must necessarily be a very seriously guarded right of every citizen of this country. My ruling in this regard, honorable member, is that I am cautioning members to be circumspect in the way in which you treat other members and other persons who are not necessarily members in this House to defend themselves.
On a point of order,
and in
Chair.
this way,
Chair.
Mr. Shibambo, please take your seat, I'm speaking.
Is it possible to ask for your removal? Can we have a different
Mr. Shibambo, please take your seat.
Can we have a different chair to at least, because you are being emotional now.
Mr. Shibambo, please take your seat.
Honorable Chairperson.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to really get involved. I really don't want to, you must excuse the factors of height. I want to, Chairperson, you've made a ruling. And I'm afraid that if you open a debate on it, you set a precedent that rulings must be debated. I would plead that if there is a contestation of what you have said, then the due process of the House be followed. Because if I make an example of myself, I've been kicked out of the House for something which I personally felt was not right. And the due process is, if I've got a problem with the ruling, then I must appeal it, not in the House. So, Chairperson, I would plead you not to allow your own ruling to be debated and set a precedent of debating the rulings.
Honorable member, I am not allowing. I am saying that freedom of speech must be a jealously guarded right. I am also saying that members must be, I am repeating myself very deliberately. I am saying that members of this House and any other House in the legislative sector of South Africa, which is governed by both the Constitution and the Powers and Privileges Act, must be circumspect in the way that they treat people who are not necessarily members in the houses where they mention or they make allegations against them. And I'm also saying that ruling in no way infringes upon the rights of the members to freedom of speech.
Thank you very much. May we have Honorable Khalo to continue with the debate. Khalo.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. The African Independent Congress is entering this very important debate with a great concern, given the fact that South African violence against women is rated the highest in the world. Recently, River Steenkamp, the model and law graduate, was shot and killed by Oscar Pistorius. Statistically, just 1 out of 3 women is killed on Valentine's Day by an intimate partner, according to a study on violence against women. Statistics also estimate that of all the matriculants, high school graduates in a class, 1/3 have been raped, and more than 30% of girls have been raped by the time they are 18. If that is the case, Honorable Chair, what exactly are we celebrating? Are we celebrating the fact that we are lacking value-based leadership in this country, which is replaced by transactional leadership who are concerned about getting rich quicker interests as above those of the nation? Who are these people who are leading us in this country? We must answer that question. Honorable Chair, discipline and acceptable behavior in any society cannot be negotiated, but it must be enforced. If we are concerned and serious about the dignity and well-being of our beloved women and children, we must make laws that bite. It can't be correct, Honorable Chair, that we will come here year in and year out celebrating the so-called Women's Month, while our mothers, sisters, and our children are being killed, raped almost every day. In conclusion, Honorable Chair, the AIC is calling upon this august House to consider bringing back the death sentence on serious cases of rape of elderly people, young girls, children with disability, or else the president of this country must call for a referendum on this matter for the masses of this country to decide and give direction. If the members of SABS in this country can kill the mine workers who were fighting for their rights on the mines, then you are protecting the criminals who are
Honorable member,
making
your time is up.
the lives of our children.
Honorable member.
Thank
your
you very
time is
much.
up. Thank you. Honorable Masango, can you continue the debate?
Honorable Chairperson, thank you. I feel very honored to participate in this occasion, which is a fitting recognition of the 60th anniversary of the Women's Charter and the 20 years of democracy, which is rightly calling upon us, all of us, to do our level best to help propel South Africa towards its revered destination, that of a non-racial, non-sexist society. The movement dates back 60 years ago when the advancement for the status of women found unambiguous articulation in the Women's Charter. The intent and purpose thereof was very, very clear. It was to right the wrongs that ravaged their lives, their families, and their communities. As a disempowered sector of society, these women could have just remained wallowing in self-pity, but they did not do that. Instead, they chose to take positive action. The Charter's clear message stated, the level of civilization which any society has reached can be measured by the degree of freedom that its members enjoy. And the status of women is a test of that civilization. Measured by that standard, South Africa must be considered quite low in the scale of civilized nations. And I close quote. From this generation of freedom fighters, history tells us that today's women continue selflessly to put a firm grasp on the baton to make the changes we want to see in honor of the courageous efforts of the heroines who took the first step 60 years ago. Today's reality is rooted in the struggles of those women that came before us who took a stand against all forms of denial of their rights. The image that is presented in this House alone is a true reflection of a multi-party democracy which includes women. But as we all know, the test of any legislation is in its practical implementation. and the impact of that application or implementation in changing the landscape of the sector, it ought to change. So, how have we fared as South Africa in these stakes? Well, according to the Millennium Development Goals Country Report of 2013, and I quote, South Africa has, since 1994, introduced a raft of laws that directly address gender issues. It has ratified a range of gender-relevant international conventions and instruments, and has established structures to address gender issues. The report also gives a very sobering picture that more and more still needs to be done. What then, Honorable Chairperson, can be done today to ensure that the gains that were heralded by these mighty women are not lost? Well, we don't need to look any far, because from speaker to speaker, even this afternoon, it has been very, very clear that more still needs to be done. I just give a snapshot of a picture that threatens to dwarf the gains of our democracy. In some respects, very key respects, I have to add, women have not enjoyed the fruit of democracy. For instance, land ownership for women on traditional land remains an issue. The Traditional Courts Bill that lapsed in the NCOP in the Fourth Parliament intended to entrench further the discrimination against women when it came especially to representing their issues before traditional courts. I just need to mention statistics that say 85% of rape meted out on women and children is committed by people known to them. What about child maintenance defaulters? Where are the fathers that are responsible? A young woman, for example, Chairperson, was murdered last week already, allegedly for being a lesbian. This is happening in a democratic state where the right to life is enshrined in the Constitution of this country. Rapists get bail and they walk the streets of our communities only to traumatize their victims further. So the whole issue of this rampant women abuse is still an everyday occurrence in our society. Well, women from all walks of life have tried to do what they can to first highlight this issue and to bring about ways to do that. And I wish to acknowledge the presence of such women this afternoon in the person of Meg Ricketts, who embarked on a one-woman walk on the 8th of August from Cape Town to Muizenberg to highlight the plight of abused women, as well as to raise the much-needed funding for the film that she's working on women abuse. Well, I'm glad to also ask the Minister of Women in the Presidency, Honorable Shabangu.
Member, just hold it. In respect to the decorum of the House, honorable members, may you please take your seats. Honorable Van Lingen, we cannot be standing at the doors as if we are not allocated seats here. May we please take our seats. I didn't expect a response. I didn't ask for a response. I'm ordering the members to take up their seats. May you proceed, honorable member.
Honorable Chairperson, we also need to focus without waiver in our enduring efforts to eradicate the oppressive legacy against women and heal the scars that laws of the past have inflicted on them. And in conclusion, Honorable Chairperson, as I salute all the women of this country for their resolve in advancing the status of women in their respective sectors and occupation, I wish to salute some women who pioneered the struggle against oppression. And these women include Margaret Ballinger, the founder of the Liberal Party; Helen Suzman, one of South Africa's anti-apartheid activists and politician; Molly Blackburn, South Africa's anti-apartheid and political activist, civil rights campaigner, and politician; and lastly, Eulalie Start, Black Search founder, anti-apartheid activist, and champion of housing for the poor. These women, I started by saying all the women of this country, these women and more use the plight they witnessed
Honorable Member, your time is up.
to
Thank you very
bring
much.
about lasting change in this nation.
Honorable Member,
Thank you.
may I call then on Honorable Shitong.
The Chair, honorable members, equality legislation simply reminds us that there is no need to have victims and victimizers. We can all be victors. Why some of us decided to be victimizers, it remains to be explained. The only thing is that we must remember that there isn't much difference between us. We only have womb women and men without womb. Since the dawn of the new South African women enjoyed equal rights, but unfortunately, equal rights only in theory, women in South Africa are still the victims of violent crimes, unemployed, homelessness, and other social adversity. In fact, Chair, the majority of women in South Africa, they are in crisis. It is the norm for government and men generally to be kept responsible and rightfully for the less favorable position of women in our society. We as men, that is men without womb, and those in government cannot with a clear conscience claim to be doing the best we can to ensure the plight of our women. We desperately need to elevate our women's standing in society for the sake of our collective good. Without a purposeful and genuine execution of a workable plan to improve the situation of women, we're working on the demise of the nation as a whole. But most importantly, Chair, is that society as a whole has to review its current values system, because it is here where we find the root problems of the plight of women. Womb creation leads to maternity wards. And the maternity, I visited Seshego Hospital last week. That maternity wards needs some attention. Once we succeed in realizing and accepting that women has a special and very important role in our society, we would have once
Honorable Member, your time is up.
too long. May we all
Honorable Member,
become
your time is up.
victors. Thank you.
May I call on Honorable Zwane to continue the debate?
Honorable Chairperson of this session, Honorable Ministers and Deputy Ministers present, Honorable Members of Parliament, our guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me thank the opportunity to take part in this very important debate where we celebrate the 60th anniversary of the Women's Charter and 20 years of freedom. Maybe it is also fitting to actually acknowledge that today we also celebrate the launch of the UDF, which was launched on the 20th of August 1993 in Cape Town. Chairperson, allow me to refer to some provisions of the Freedom Charter, and I want to quote where it says, "The rights of the people shall be the same regardless of sex, color, and race." And it further says that the national wealth of the country, the heritage of South Africans, shall be restored to the people. Close quotation. In the past 20 years, the ANC-led government has transformed this country. It has transformed the country that was undemocratic, unrepresentative, oppressive, a corrupt state serving a minority, and they turned the state into a unitary, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic state, answerable to and representative to all South Africans. And this is what women were yearning for in the Women's Charter. Adopted on the 17th of April, 1954 in Johannesburg, women said, and I quote, "We women share with our menfolk the care, the anxieties imposed by poverty and its evils. As wives and mothers, it falls upon us to make small wages stretch a long way. It is us who hear the cries of our children when they are hungry and sick. We march forward with our men in the struggle for liberation and the defense of the working people. We pledge ourselves to keep high the banner of equality, transparency, and liberty. As women, there rests upon us also the burden of removing from our society all social differences developed in the past times between men and women, which have had the effect of keeping our sex in a position of inferiority and being subordinates. As we celebrate this anniversary and 20 years of freedom, we pride ourselves in the fact that a lot has been done by the ANC-led government to emancipate women and bring about equality between men and women. And we cannot forget to acknowledge the efforts and the contribution and the selfless sacrifice of those women who fought the struggle and they've gone before us and paved the way for us to be able to participate in these fruits of democracy. And they did not fight, by the way, for a specific party. They fought for everybody in this room. We cannot forget to mention a few, like Mama Charlotte Maxeke, Mama Lillian Ngoyi, Mama Helen Joseph, Mama Betha Mkhize, Mama Madikizela Mandela, Mama Nkosazana Zuma, the chairperson of the AU Commission, Mama Adelaide Tambo, Mama Albertina Sisulu, no Mama uNosipho Ntwanambi. Another set of women that I think it is important to celebrate, because whilst they were not active politicians, but they brought up, they nurtured, they molded our own leaders that have resurrected this country from the ashes of apartheid to where it is today. Umama uNoqaphi Nosekeni, the third wife of Inkosi Mphakanyiswa Mandela of Amampemvu clan, the mother of the former president Nelson Mandela, needs to be acknowledged. He did a good job. Mama osanda kushiya, umama uEpanet Mbeki, the mother of former President Mbeki, the second president of the democratic South Africa. Mama uGcinamazwi Zuma, the mother of the incumbent president. Owakhulisa upresident nengane zakwabo under very trying circumstances as a domestic worker. But despite those difficulties, he brought up a president of the country that is leading us forward, taking South Africa forward. A lot has been done to address the basic needs of women and to pass legislation that have actually protected women and children. But before I proceed, I want to refer to what Honorable Robinson said when he said that there's a lot of crime, women are not protected, and the government is not doing anything about it. I want to refer to her by saying, I'm surprised that as an honorable member, she's not aware that there's legislation that protects women against abuse. And I'm surprised that she does not know that there is legislation that has actually strengthened the sentences meted out to people who commit abuse, to women and children. And there is also a lot of lamenting about the fact that there are a lot of abusers. Yes, there are. You know why? It is because the tendency to develop to be an abuser is created by the fact that in most cases, children grow in an environment where parents are away, particularly mothers. And when we conduct an investigation, where are the mothers? Mothers are out in the city, fending for their children, to get bread and milk for their children, to get all the needs for their children. Where in the city, they are working as domestic workers, serving the madame and the monsieur. I also want to refer to the issue raised by the honorable member of the EFF, Ngoniso, regarding the issue of the wages for farm workers and domestic workers. I want to say, let us put the whole thing into perspective. When the government of the people by the people took over, those people were not even earning a salary. They were given rations. And this very government has developed legislation, and a specific formula is used where we consider the CPI and we add 1% or 2%, and we define the areas where these people are working, and we determine on those bases what amount they are getting. You can come with proposal, but the ANC has paved the way. With regards to the provision of basic services, water, we still have a lot of work to do. But remember, we are facing challenges as well. We are working, trying to provide our people that they are deserving with water and other basic needs. And there are people that are tampering with the systems, connecting to the services illegally. Labo bantu, they are not sent by the ruling party. The issue of provision of electricity. Uyabona bangabufaka ugesi emzini noma imuphi umuzi la ufaka khona ikakhulukazi lapha emaphandleni. Usuke usho ukuthi lapha kulo muzi umama wakhona akasezokuhamba u3 hours eyotheza izinkuni ebelethe ingane emhlana abuye nengane nezinkuni ekhanda azobeka ibhodwe eziko aqhamuke kubaba ahlale adle nezingane zakhe. Usukusho njalo.
Unfortunately, your time is up. May I call on Honorable Godi to continue the debate?
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Comrades and honorable members. Honorable Chair, it was in the crucible of struggle and in the formations of the liberation movement that the progressive ideas of gender equality were conceived and mainstreamed. The empowering of women is an integral part of our transformation journey, be it through affirmative action or employment equity. As a country, we owe a lot. As a country, we owe a lot to the women of our nation. Women are at the center of our existence as communities. If we look at that beyond the narrow prism of politics, women keep families together and are the core of our communities. It is to our credit as a country that progressive legislations are in place to enable for the realization of the full potential of women in our country. Our challenge, Honorable Chair, is to ensure that the lived experiences of our women are in line with the values and aspirations of our Constitution. We are challenged to close the gap between our laws and the reality of women's experiences, especially African women in the slums, in the rural areas, and in the farms. African women continue to be the victims of patriarchy, of racism, and capitalist exploitation. We salute the heroines of our struggle, those who served, suffered, and sacrificed for our freedom. But, Honorable Chairperson, I will be failing in my duties if, as we celebrate the women of our country, we forget the suffering of the women of Palestine, especially the women of Gaza, who are facing horrible challenges visited upon them by Israel, supported by America. We have a responsibility to support the people of Palestine in their struggle for freedom and to wish success and courage to the resistance fighters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kodi. Honorable Kaula.
Honorable Chairperson, the Inkatha Freedom Party applauds the hundreds of thousands of women of South Africa who praised the sun in 1956 in a historic march to Pretoria to demand their birthright to equality from the brutal government of that time. These were remarkable women from all walks of life whose unity went beyond the petty boundaries of race, religion, ideology, and color. They were brought together by the real principle of unity. Generations today can learn a lot from their principle of unity and how much can be achieved if togetherness is pursued appropriately. As South Africans, we draw much enthusiasm from the Women's Charter of 1954 and the 1994 Women's Charter for Effective Equality. The IFP, under the leadership of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, has always put gender equality and gender mainstreaming issues high in the agenda. Hence, an active women's brigade wing of the party from its inception. The IFP has always been part of the intensive lobbying and collaboration in this House and in the country for active gender machinery in South Africa. We are therefore proud of the achievements reflected through several anti-discriminatory laws promulgated. Since 1994, some progress has been made in raising the voice of women. Therefore, 20 years into our democracy, we can count as our success that constitutionally and legislatively, gender equality has been entrenched. The country has legislated the right to equality irrespective of gender, race, color, or religion. Our women folk can transcend the barriers of yesteryear of race, gender, and social class to get their education of their choice partly and become anything they choose with no strings attached to career choice. But the question we need to ask ourselves as legislators, as public representatives, as leaders, as political parties, and as South Africans is whether legislation and policies have adequately enabled all forms of gender inequality to be adequately removed and vanish in our communities, both in the public and private sector activities. In this regard, the IFP maintains that though this much has been achieved, a lot more still needs to be done. A lot of the social ills that happen in our communities still target to a greater extent the women of our country. The country is still confronted with increased levels of gender-based violence, rape, child abuse, and girl children abuse. early childhood marriages, women targeted by soft targets, sexual violence and domestic violence. Women are vulnerable targets, and women are are suffering a variety of social ills and gender exploitation. Democracy in our country has not yet removed the social ills of poverty, has not totally removed deprivation and marginalization. When government at all levels fails to deliver the much needed basic services of water, electricity, houses, and decent roads, it is women of our country who suffer the most because they are the backbone of our families and communities. This anchor role of our women.
Honorable Kaula, your time is up.
Thanks.
Honorable Waters.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, it's a privilege for me to be in this debate today. Yeah, it's a nice scarf. If we are to achieve equality for women, it's going to take men and women in this country to achieve it. If we are to achieve equality for men, it's going to take men and women to achieve it. And if we are to achieve equal rights for children, it's going to take men and women to achieve it. So it's a great privilege to be here. It is unfortunate that out of the 6 ANC speakers here today, not one was a man. I don't know if the men are scared to come up here and speak on gender issues, but maybe next year you might put some men in the debate. It is also unfortunate that the leader of the ANC's Women's League is also not here in this debate. Chair, if the public were watching, well, the public that are watching this debate must breathe a sigh of relief that the information bill has not yet been passed in this parliament, else their freedom of speech would be infringed upon as much as ours was nearly today. And I would like to quote from a constitutional court judgment where a woman, Honourable Dalil, when she was in this chamber, took the Speaker of the National Assembly to court over freedom of speech in this chamber. And I'd like to quote, "Such powers and privileges, to the extent of the inconsistency and incompatibility with the Constitution, are invalid. Where privilege breaches the provisions of the Constitution, the aggrieved party is entitled to seek redress from the court," close quotes. In other words, the Constitution supersedes any act of this country. So our freedom of speech is entrenched in this House. And I can assure the Speaker of the NCOP that if our freedom of speech is infringed, we will be going to court. Chair, no one can deny that the life has improved with the vast majority of women over the past 20 years. The question we should all be asking ourselves is whether we have done all we could to ensure effective legislation that would give meaningful effect to the hard-won rights of women. I would put it to the House that we could have and should have done a lot more. If one looks at the Sexual Offences Register, which is the responsibility of the Department of Justice, and the Child Protection Register, which is the responsibility of the Department of Social Development, one has to ask, why do we have 2 separate registers? The Sexual Offences Register is limited to sexual crimes against women and children, while the Child Protection Register is limited to, obviously, children, including crimes of assault, sexual offences, and even considers the identification of people found to be unfit to work with children by a disciplinary in the workplace. Both these registers were created to protect women and girls from would-be predators. It is unfortunate, Chair, that when private members' bills are introduced to help strengthen the Child Protection Register, the ANC-dominated Social Development Committee rejected them, purely because they came from an opposition MP. Honourable members, I refer to the private members' bill I introduced last year, calling for the inclusion of attempted rape convictions as grounds to find someone unsuitable to work with children. I thought it was quite a simple private members' bill. An initiative which would have corrected a serious omission in the Children's Act. Coincidentally, members, it was exactly a year ago today that the committee rejected the bill on the 20th of August 2013, 1 year ago today. And the ANC members in the committee used the excuse that a comprehensive amendment to the Children's Act would be forthcoming. Well, a year down the line, we are still waiting for these so-called amendments to the Act. And who knows when these amendments will be tabled. We also don't know how many people convicted of attempted rape continue to work with women and children. We don't know. Yeah, we don't know. And I don't think many of you care. Chair, cry on. That's the response from the ANC. Cry on, because people who have been convicted of attempted rape are working with women and children. I hope every woman in this country hears what you say, Honourable Member. Chair, and I'll protect your right to say it, freedom of speech. Chair, I also wrote to the South African Human Rights Commission and asked them to investigate the dysfunctionality of the Child Protection Register and the need for two separate registers, as it is diluting valuable resources. The South African Human Rights Commission has found that by failing to adequately maintain and populate the Child Protection Register, the Department of Social Development is violating the rights of children in terms of Section 28 of the Bill of Rights. In a damning report implicating the Department of Justice, Constitutional Development, Social Development, and then the woman, and now woman in the presidency, the South African Human Rights Commission found that the state is not fulfilling its objectives to protect children from abuse and neglect. The current Child Protection Register is not a true reflection of crimes committed against children. Failure to adequately implement the register has rendered it ineffective. The correlation of submissions, receipts, and recordings of data for the Child Protection Register is inadequate. The training of officials to fulfill obligations related to the register is inadequate, and the Department of Social Development has had plenty of time to engage with relevant departments and entities to ensure that the register's success, but has failed to do so. It is obvious, honourable members, that we need one combined register that encapsulates the full scope of both the registers, where resources can be pulled together and where the courts only have to report to one department. Chair, the latest figures I have found on the number of names appearing on the Sexual Offences Register is just over 5,000. And if you take the 2012-13 year figures of abuse against women, 2,226 women were murdered in that year alone. That's 6 per day. And 29,928 recorded sexual offences were for the same period. The fact that we only have 5,000 names on the register is an indictment. The Child Protection Register is even in a worse state. Given the fact that we have over 25,000 sexual offences committed against children every year and reported, the Child Protection Register has a dismal 488 names on it. 488 names. This is simply unacceptable and, in fact, an insult to our children. While we must all be cognizant of the fact that the register will not, unfortunately, end abuse, we must use it as an effective tool in ensuring people that are in danger, that are a danger to women and girls, are kept away from them. Chair, another area where we are hopelessly failing our women and children is that of convicting perpetrators of sexual crimes. In the 2011-12 year, only 11% of reported sexual offences actually reached the courts. And of those, only 6.9% of these cases actually resulted in conviction. These shockingly low conviction rates are directly linked to what the DA believes to the scrapping of the specialised police units, the FCS units, that was family violence, child abuse and sexual offences, which the ANC scrapped, and the specialised sexual offences courts, which the ANC scrapped. The DA warned against the dismantling of centres of excellence, stating that it would have a direct effect on the investigation of sexual crimes and the conviction rate of sexual crimes. We take no pleasure in saying we told you so. We welcome the re-establishment of the FCS units, thank you, and sexual offences courts, and urge the government to allocate more money, especially to the sexual offences courts, where only 20 million rand was budgeted this year. To put it in more concisely terms, if you commit a sexual offence against a woman or a child in our country, you have a 93% chance of getting away with it. Great odds. And on the slim chance that you are actually found guilty of one of these crimes, the chance of your name appearing in the register is even slimmer yet, resulting in hundreds of convicted sexual offenders free to work with and prey on our women and children daily. So Chair, I started my speech by saying have we done all we could to ensure effective legislation that would give meaningful effect to the hard-won rights of women? And I put it to you that the answer is no. Now, if I may, Chair, I've still got a few minutes left. I would like to respond to what some of the ANC members said here today. And I would like to, Honourable Zwani, who spoke last for the ANC, where she said that she's very confused by the comments made by Honourable Robinson about how many crimes are committed against women and women are not protected. You said there's legislation that protects women. And yes, we have fantastic legislation. We do. We have fantastic legislation on the statute books. But the fact is we don't implement that legislation. And that is a huge problem with this side of the House. And I'd like to cite two acts. The Domestic Violence Act, right, which is a great act. We all agree, we supported it. But it's poorly implemented. In fact, police continuously turn away women that go to police stations to report abuse by a spouse or a partner. They refuse to put the names of the spouse and the partner into the register for domestic violence. They send the woman back home to her spouse and partner that abuses her again. Often, the abusive spouse and partner applies for a firearm license, and because their name does not appear in the register, they are awarded that license, which they use to kill their partner. So that's where the domestic violence is failing. And the ANC members are saying report. We blew in the face reporting. It's about time as a government you did something about it. Then the maintenance courts. A great idea, the maintenance courts, but they are in total disarray. And in fact, in the papers this week, in one of the KZN papers, a woman had gone 62 times to the maintenance courts. 62, not 2, not 6, 62. And as a last resort, she was forced to go to the High Court in order to get the maintenance court to get the maintenance from her ex-husband. And this is what women have to put up on a daily basis. Yeah. Then, as far as the Honourable, and I hope I pronounce your name, Mamala, the first member, who talked about the 50-50 quota in the ANC. Now, as you know, the DA doesn't have a 50-50 quota because we believe that women could actually have more than 50% of the seats. We don't care. But what I would like to say to you, in the 100 years of your existence as an ANC, how many female leaders have you actually had? None. You have had none. Yeah. And our leader is a female. Yeah. Secondly, as far as the premiers in the 8 provinces you control.
Will the member answer a question?
When it came,
Honourable member, just hold.
You talk
yes,
of your leader as being a woman.
What's the point of order, ma'am?
It's not a point of order.
What is it?
I asked if the member can take a question.
Okay. Honourable member, are you prepared to take a question?
If I have time, Chair.
Yeah, you can't have time.
Honourable members, I would not be able to hear. What is your response, sir?
If I have time.
If you have, are you prepared to take a question?
Not now. I want to finish my speech.
Are you prepared to take a question?
No,
yes
I
or
want
no?
to finish my speech.
Okay. The member is not prepared to take a question.
May I continue, Chair? May I continue?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Right. So what's very surprising is that with the ANC's 8 provinces that they control, I didn't see the 50-50 split being enforced there. In fact, only 1 out of your 8 provinces, if I can count correctly, is actually a female premier. And she's sitting right here, the honourable member, right in front of me. And the change occurred because the Thuli House didn't enforce the 50-50. You gave the provinces the freedom to choose their own premier. So where the ANC does not enforce 50-50 split, your party reverts back to putting men in positions. And it reminds me of the saying that so far and no further will women go in the ANC on their own because of the way your party is structured. But getting back to women and children, Chairperson, that if we are to give effect to the great legislation that we do have in this House, it's going to take all of us here to ensure that we get it implemented and enforced to protect women. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Honorable Minister, Shabangu, may you conclude the debate?
Thank you very much. Honorable Chairperson, Ministers and Deputy Ministers, honorable members, it is indeed today an exciting day. It was the English modernist writer Virginia Woolf who said, I quote, "For most of history, Anonymous was a woman. However, she has achieved much, not for praise, but to better the world." As we gather in this house today to reflect on the celebration of the 60th anniversary of the Women's Charter and 20 years of freedom, together moving a non-racial, non-sexist South Africa forward, we remain not only mindful but forever indebted for the great sacrifices of our foremothers who have made to ensure that future generations live in a non-racial and non-sexist country where citizens enjoy equal access and participation in the economy. As we are here today, the heroic exploits which are often relegated to the footnotes of history of these women and many others who joined forces and marched to the Union building on the 9th of August in 1956, turning the course of history, must continue to be told and celebrated. Those are the women who stood for non-racial, non-sexist South Africa: Helen Joseph, Lillian Ngoyi, Sophie de Bruyn, Rahima Musa, and many others in our history. The struggles that the women marchers of 1956 embarked upon is in many ways still relevant today. Those women were not only fighting for political emancipation, but economic empowerment, equal representation, access to justice, land rights, and others, as articulated in the Women's Charter of 1954. This shows that when you're in the ANC, you have visionaries. You had women in 1954, 17th of April, already they had a vision about the future of this country. Hence, we are here today as women. The 1954 Women's Charter called for the enfranchisement of men and women of all races, the right to vote and be elected to all state bodies, the right to full opportunities for employment with equal pay and possibilities of promotion in all spheres of work. Hence, they had a vision: equal work for equal pay, equal rights in relation to property, land rights, marriages, and children. As we celebrate the 20 years of democracy today, it's one of the most important days. Again, the heroines in the ANC always rise and continue as women, contributing to the struggles of South Africa. On this day, here in Cape Town, when the United Democratic Party was formed, once more, the ANC elected a woman, Mama Albertina Sisulu, to lead it. It's the ANC which is...
Yes, Honorable Mandela is always exchanging seats.
Honorable member,
and you didn't say anything about it.
I have not recognized and heard anything that you said. Can you continue, Honorable Minister?
Thank you. It's Mama Sisulu, once more in the ANC, who led the mass democratic movement of our country, leading South Africa forward. Therefore, the struggles of our women, which was embarked upon, is still relevant today. Those heroic women did not only fight for political emancipation, but economic empowerment, equal representation, access to justice, as articulated in the Women's Charter of 1954. This was further reiterated in the 1994 Women's Charter for Effective Equality. Again, may I indicate, it's the ANC and the ANC women who led the Women's Coalition in 1993 for us to adopt the Women's Charter for Effective Equality. But let me also remind you, as we were marching towards this parliament in 1994, it's the women on my right who are predecessors of DA who reserved the right to endorse the Women's Charter for Equality, for Effective Equality. They never endorsed that. Hence, we are surprised today when they think that they are the champion of the women's struggle in South Africa. They forget there's a history laid by those women who never minded their own lives. They sacrificed their lives to make South Africa to be where we are. It further demanded, the Women's Charter, a paid maternity leave for women, childcare for working mothers, and free and compulsory education for all South African children. The demands in the Women's Charter, which were ultimately incorporated in the Freedom Charter and used by the Women's Coalition, we are the beneficiaries. And even those who never throw a stone are beneficiaries, despite that they were living in their comforts. As we meet today, it is important for us to reflect on where we come from, where we are today, and the future that we desire to improve the lives of women in South Africa, led by the ANC. A brief synopsis of the past laws demonstrates how the laws in its various forms had a significant role in the prejudice against women, which is the result of the current challenges of poverty, inequalities, and unemployment. For example, the Black Administration Act number 38 of 1927, which regulated most personal aspects of lives for black people, had a section which deemed black women married under customary law to have the same legal status as a minor under the civil law, which we changed when we came to this parliament. This placed the black woman under customary law under the tutelage of their husbands. And your predecessors were here endorsing that. For many years, the consequence of this provision was to deny black women married under customary law contractual rights, direct property ownership, right and the right to inherit from their husbands and other families. As we see today, those are some of the challenges we in the Women's League continue to spearhead and making sure that South Africa moves forward for a South Africa which is better for all of us. The denial of inheritance right to black women was further consolidated by Section 23 of the Black Administrative Act with Regulations 2000. It provided that the estate of a black man must devolve in terms of black custom, while Regulatory R 2000 outlined the male family tree in terms of which such estate had to devolve. The primogeniture rule, the rule that eldest male son or male relative inheritance at the exclusion of wife and children. May I also remind this House, one of our members who was a woman and supposed to have inherited as a traditional leader had to win in the Constitutional Court when there was a continuous effort to make sure that she cannot take over the inheritance. As we know today, there was this law which was undone by the Constitutional Court in the Bear decision. We come from an era where domestic violence was legalized in South Africa. Some of the issues raised in this podium by Honorable Waters, we have moved a long way. We have changed domestic violence. Yes, we accept that there's still a lot to be done, but we've passed many laws. And those laws are not an event. They are a process. They are real. They must deal with deep-seated illegacies of the past, because if the old laws had created an opportunity for a woman to be recognized and respected as a human being, we would not be talking about these issues today. Bantu education further entrenched the race, gender, and class inequalities, whereby it encourages the girl child to pursue home economics and not the math, science, and technology, and thereby excluding them from the sectors such as finance, mining, and technical fields. Furthermore, there was a tendency of discouraging the girl child from going to school because they were going to be married off. In addition to that, the girl child is often affected by issues of menstrual dignity, teenage pregnancies, and early marriage. These are historical impediments that resulted in the continued disadvantage for women, which hinders the progress and the progressive legislations that this democratic government has developed. But once more, let's thank the ANC Youth League for leading the campaign, including you, Juju, in the sanitary towels for young women.
Order, Honorable Speaker. Order. You are not our friend. You are not our friend.
Honorable member.
Order, Chairperson.
Just hold. What? Can I hear the point of order?
The Honorable Minister must with immediate effect retract calling the President and Commander-in-Chief of the EFF Juju. He must say Honorable CIC.
May we...
Honorable Juju.
But equally so, just hold it, Honorable Minister. Equally so, whilst I take the point as a genuine point of order, equally so should we recognize the fact that when we use words in this House, there must be a true reflection of what is happening in this House as we respect. We do not have a commander-in-chief outside of the President of the Republic.
Chair, you made the same mistake in the last sitting of the joint sitting.
Honorable Shivambu.
I want to clarify
Honorable
you on this thing
Shivambu,
because
what is your point?
the point is that all organizations refer to their leaders as president, although there's a president of the republic.
Honorable Shivambu.
In our case, we call the commander-in-chief and the president of the EFF, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Honorable Shivambu, can I order you to sit down?
Yeah, you can't.
Can I order you to sit down?
Yeah, but you must not thumbs up rules.
May I order you to sit down, Honorable Shivambu? Honorable Member, Minister, may you continue with the debate?
Chair, on a point of order.
May I hear the point of order?
I think Floyd raises a very important point, Chair. No. We're going to listen to each other here. Because all of us here, we come from different organizations. And we have presidents of those organizations, including the president of the country. And when that title is used referring to a different president, there is no crisis.
I thought,
and then you want to have a problem with a different title, which is used by different organizations.
May I clarify myself, Honorable?
No, you can't clarify yourself before I make a submission.
No, I hear what you say.
No, you are not hearing what I'm saying. I'm making a submission.
What is your submission?
Listen to me, I'm making a submission. We are going to listen to each other here. We must not be impatient with each other. We must listen to each other.
No.
Yes,
I'm asking you, what is your submission?
No. You can't say no, because
what
when you say no,
I've got the right
I'm going to say yes.
What is your submission?
My submission is that your ruling is wrong. The President Zuma is a commander-in-chief of the armed forces of South Africa. And it is understood within that context. And this honorable member
may you sit down
is referring to a different commander-in-chief. And we are not going to be suppressed here and be told how we must address each other here.
I'm not suppressing you. I'm ordering you or requesting you to sit down. You see, we need to be very consistent in whatever that we are doing. Because I don't want to engage with another member on a matter that I have reflected on. There was an earlier suggestion, and we all agreed as a House, to say in order to respect the decorum of the House, if the presiding officer has made a decision, as a human being, whether you like it or not, even if it is a wrong decision, follow the recourse as provided for.
Order.
No. You can't call me to order, Chief.
Why not?
No,
Why
you can't
not?
call me to order.
You are not above our orders.
Chief, You cannot call me to order.
You are
Honorable
human.
member.
You are human.
Honorable member.
Hear the order.
Honorable member.
Hear the
Honorable
order.
member, I'm ordering you to
But
sit
you must
down.
hear the order. You are
Honorable
human.
member.
Photocopy of Tandy.
Honorable member.
Listen to the order.
I'm ordering you to sit down.
The order is that you must listen.
This is now bordering. This is now bordering only on being grossly out of order.
You would have done it. You are responsible for it.
Honorable members, this is now bordering on being
We are
grossly
collapsing
out
this
of
house.
order. Honorable members, it won't help to shout. I mean, the honorable member has made a point to say that we must listen to each other. And that's exactly what I did. And I listened to you, and I'm saying, if by any order you are aggrieved, there are processes that you can follow. There are processes that we can follow in order to deal with that grief. Therefore, I am ordering all members to resist from getting to points of order and allow the minister to continue with the debate. Is it on the debate?
Chairperson, I just want to understand. Are you saying you have ruled that we cannot say CIC? I just want to understand. Is that your ruling in this house?
Honorable member, I'm not going to engage on that matter, and now I'm ordering the minister to continue with the debate. Honorable Minister, may you proceed with the debate.
On a point of order on the debate.
On a point of order, House Chair.
Chairperson.
On a point of order, House Chair.
We are
Chairperson.
raising a point of order on the debate by the minister.
Honorable member, I've made a ruling to say that the minister...
I'm not challenging your ruling. I've got a point of order on the utterances of the honorable minister.
Point of order. Okay, may I hear the point of order?
The point of order here is that according to the records of parliament, there is no person by the name of Juju.
Okay.
So he must withdraw
I take the
that.
point of order. Honorable
Now.
Minister, may you address the honorable member as an honorable member of this house.
House, House Chairperson, before you proceed, may I call you on a point of order? I'm requesting there are two members of EFF. One is sitting next to Honorable Ndlozi with a white attire. I'm not so sure what's her name. I would have referred her with a proper name. She used a mic, so it will appear on Hansard. She insulted the presiding officer, and I request that Hansard is being read and proper procedures, and she be reprimanded for that conduct. Secondly, so I'm it will be on Hansard because she used the mic. Once a person uses a mic, it will be recorded. The second one is on Honorable Ndlozi, who called the presiding officer a coward. If he can withdraw.
Honorable members, well, I didn't hear the insult, I must say. Even the reference to a coward, I didn't hear. May I therefore be allowed an opportunity to listen to answer and therefore on the basis of that information, make a ruling on that.
No, I can withdraw the coward one. I did say
Oh,
it.
you said it?
Too much, and I'm very sorry.
Okay. All right. Yes, honorable member.
No, Chair, I was having a problem the way you were handling your meeting. And I said you are collapsing the house by not want to listen to us.
So, honorable, because you see, I cannot even, as I'm seated here, because of, I didn't hear the exact words as they were said then, whether to agree or not to agree, whether if there's a spin or there's no spin. May I therefore be allowed to listen to Hansard to say exactly what is it that was said, and therefore come back to the House with the ruling. Thank you very much. Honorable Minister, may you proceed.
Thank you. Honorable Julius Malema, I apologize. The emancipation of women therefore still remains a cardinal goal and an anchor for a free, democratic and prosperous South Africa. Given the legacy of women's oppression, generally and specifically African women, our bias is towards the working class and rural women. 2 decades is a marked increase in the representation of women in this parliament and government, well as in the private sector, because of the unprecedented body of laws that this ANC government has introduced. As we speak today, we have women judges who constitute about 30% of all judges. There is even a woman judge president and a woman deputy judge president. Two of the Constitutional Court judges, the highest court in the land, in the magistracy, women constitute about 41% of the total magistracy. Women are also represented in the Judicial Service Commission and the Magistrates Commission. Thank you to the ANC. Thank you to those 1956 women who marched in recognizing and making us to realize and women participate in areas which were not allowed in this country. South African women are not only holding leadership positions in national structures, but also in the international fora. We have some of our own, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma in the AU, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka, our former deputy president. Those are the products of the ANC. Whilst we celebrate this in the private sector, we still acknowledge that we still lag behind. Business Women South Africa Census report indicates that women make 52% of South African population in 2012. But as we speak today, we only accounted for just 3.6% of women as CEO positions, 5.5% of chairperson's position, 17.1% of directorship, and 21% of executive management positions. Whilst we acknowledge this, we will continue as the ANC in advancing the struggles of women in a qualitative and effective way. Comparatively, women, which currently we say account for 9% of executive management and director position in Australia and in Canada of executive positions. This demonstrates that women's active participation in the economy continues to be a challenge, but we are prepared to advance our women in making sure that in all sectors of our economy, we do participate. As this ministry, we will continue to play our role in emphasizing by monitoring and evaluation to ensure that we identify the gaps, addresses the inhibitors, also influence policy directions, and look at the various gaps which tend to stand in the way of women in advancing their careers. As we speak today, South Africa report on the MDGs in 2011 indicates that South Africa has reached the targets in terms of the registration of girls at schools. The question is whether or not the girl child complete grade 12, and if she does she complete tertiary? When completing tertiary, where does she end up? That's the challenge for all of us in this house. It is important that we track the progress of a girl child from high school to tertiary and the industry to monitor why girl childs are not represented in some of the areas. But we're also saying today we are making headways. Thanks to the inclusive policies of the ANC-led government, the girl child is not excluded from school system anymore as the result of pregnancy. Education, therefore, remains a major catalyst for human development. It is important that the girl child has access to lifelong learning, as well as education and training, which will in turn contribute towards improving the quality of lives and building a peaceful, prosperous, and democratic South Africa. This allows the continued efforts to ensure that the girl child participates in the government economic empowerment, as we all know, such as Operation Pakisa, Ocean Economy, and the National Infrastructure Plan Economy. Recently, on the 8th of August, we celebrated young women in aviation and the Navy, where for the first time in this country, we have young women who are also captains, who are flying and being pilots in our country. Some are sailors within our Navy. We must applaud Minister Naledi Pandor, who has also honored women achievers in science and technology, who has made strides that young women are not just women who are there to render their sweat and work, but they become researchers. They also have PhDs. This is the beginning of a successful South Africa in ensuring that we defeat poverty, but also are able to make sure that women take control of themselves and get empowered. We have to ensure that more young women are skilled in the areas which were previously male-dominated, especially in areas such as the aquamarine shipping industry to demystify everything which said it's not possible for women to advance in all areas of the economy. If women constitute 52% of the population, then the 50-50 policy is relevant as it will allow for an environment where equality is a reality for all citizens of our society. A DTI study findings show that public procurement constitutes of 10 to 15% of GDP in developed countries and up to 20% in developing countries. In South Africa, it's estimated that around 38% of businesses are owned by women. Whilst we welcome and applaud this, but we still say a lot needs to be done, and that the country has made a useful of preferential procurement policies to create greater opportunities for women to promote their access and visibility in the public procurement spending. Once more, thank you, ANC, for being a visionary organization. Women-owned businesses still faces various barriers in accessing some of the procurement and supply chain. Recently, Stats SA released the outcome of 2013 survey of employers and self-employed, which reported that women constitute 44.6% of individuals running small businesses, and these are individuals that do not benefit from procurement. This is an economic area that we must still penetrate, given that affirmative procurement can serve as an important tool for advancing marginalized groups such as women-owned businesses. A study by Business Women Association of South Africa confirms that women-owned businesses are still underrepresented in public procurement when compared to their male counterparts, and are likely to account for more than 25% of procurement spend in the country. Further, the study indicates that over the 2011-2012 financial year, women-owned businesses were recipients of 16.56 billion rand in government procurement spending out of total of 183 billion rand, which represents only 30%. This is not sufficient, but we are committed as the ANC government to making it better. The sampling again shows the need to further interrogate and to find out where exactly and how are we going to make sure that women become beneficiaries in the value chain. The purpose of small business and cooperatives should be to ensure that women are able to ensure that it does not become an end, but should be the beginning for women to grow bigger. In order for this to happen, an enabling environment should be created through, amongst others, vigorous skilling, mentoring, and access to finance from developmental fundings. We welcome the establishment of the Small Business Development Ministry led by Minister Zulu, as this will serve as a critical cornerstone to allow women to grow into the mainstream economy. Government has introduced a number of programs which have a potential in women's economic participation in the entire value chain. Some of the programs include the National Infrastructure Plan, which intends to transform our economic landscape while simultaneously creating significant number of new jobs and to strengthen the delivery of basic services. The plan also supports the integration of our African economy. It will transform the economy, directing the national growth and driving job creation by implementing a long-term government-led infrastructure investment plan. The Department of Women, I want to say, will continue playing an instrumental role in ensuring that the integration of women and girl children in the National Infrastructure Plan by ensuring that the skills development programs of the country, skills and reskilling women and girl children becomes a reality. We will also engage in public education to facilitate the participation and the empowerment of women in our country. As we stand today, we are proud also to look at Operation Pakisa as another opportunity in the ocean economy, which has been identified also by the National Development as one of the key drivers to eliminate poverty and reduce inequality in South Africa by 2030. It involves a number of key areas such as aquaculture, marine transport, offshore oil, and others, providing much-needed jobs and improving prosperity while environmental sustainability and integrity, and plans to explore parts of ocean to find economic potential that could contribute to our country. One of the issues which we are raising as we move to new opportunities and game changers for our country. These game changers cannot come as a success unless we take a deliberate approach in making sure that women do indeed get skilled and make sure that they can contribute in ensuring that our economy grows. But as we all know that when women are empowered, it's not just women, but it's also the empowerment of the whole nation. We will follow closely as this department in making sure that indeed women play a critical role, and hence our foremothers and forebearers lie in their graves peacefully and realize that their struggles were not in vain. As we speak today, we have the Human Resource Development Council of South Africa, which is a multi-stakeholder body that creates an enabling, coordinated, and integrated environment to focus improving human resource development and ensuring that our skills as South Africa are able and allow us to compete with the rest of the world. And for us, it's important to make sure that women play a critical role. As the minister in the presidency, we believe that we are indeed strategically located to focus on the socio-economic transformation of women. As South Africa celebrates 20 years of democracy and 60 years since the pronouncement of the Women's Charter, there has been progress. And those who refuses to acknowledge that indeed we are a better South Africa today than yesterday, therefore it means they will never ever see, be it today, be it tomorrow, they'll remain in the dark without realizing that the country has changed. It was not by mistake when President Jacob Zuma located the Department of Women in the president. He realizes that in itself signifies the fact that it is established as a game changer with strategic imperatives of transforming the socio-economic status of women and accelerating gender equality. The program structure of the department should be designed to achieve the strategic objectives which it was established. As we speak today, we have women in professional positions in many areas of our country. Therefore, we want to say, for all of us as a country, we need to continue in supporting women. Just to respond to Waters, when it comes to the point of my party, my organization, talking about the number of premiers, Honorable Waters, Honorable Waters, none of your business. Honorable Waters, talking about the number of premiers in the ANC or appointed by the ANC. If you look at the ANC, whilst we have the number of premiers who are more, but also we have a balance where we have a men, the speakers are women. So we recognize the 50-50. What are you doing with the tinge of women which you have in the DA? 1, 2, 3, 4, tinge of women in the DA. You need to change that. We are a country which have a vision, as I've indicated, but also in the ANC, we don't join the ANC by making an application. I hereby want to be a member of the ANC. We are different because we are a mass-based organization, and we don't bring people on the basis of us trying to make sure that we put them in positions today and change them tomorrow. Where's Lindiwe today? Where's Lindiwe today? We are an organization which believes that we need to move forward. But I must also say, for us as the ANC, we are an inclusive and embracive organization. One of the issues which we need to do, we don't focus on one aspect of the challenges of our country. Everything for us is being addressed, including violence against women and children. So we are not selective to suit ourselves, because the pain of those women, it's our pain. The pain of the working mothers, it's our pain. You don't know what is it to be led by a woman who is a domestic worker. You know that woman as the person who just cleans your house. Those are our parents who brought us up with a migrant salary, which you paid them. We are proud as the ANC. We have passed laws, including the domestic workers. Today, we are a proud South Africa, even we have not succeeded in everything. For the first time in this country, domestic workers are protected. 680,000 domestic workers are registered today. They have a minimum wage. We are not saying it's enough, but we are saying we are on the right track. Domestic workers, as we speak today, they qualify for UIF, contributed by employers and themselves. We are a country which is changing. We are a country which is moving forward. The review of domestic workers and sectoral determinations are there as part of a process of making sure that, hi, man, just behave. You are an adult.
Honorable members, can you allow the minister to continue with the debate?
You know,
and stop
Honorable Chair,
interrupting with
I
her?
wonder this honorable member, when his children, or if he doesn't have children, has his siblings who are watching him behaving like this, what do they say? What kind of a big brother? He becomes a bad example as a person. Please behave. Please, please behave. Behave. You are an adult with your blue scarf. Behave. You know, you've got a sash. Let me say, the sash you having.
Honorable Minister, may you just focus on addressing me?
The sash you having, honorable member, the sash you having reflects an oppressed woman who is there putting on a sash because he must be submissive. If you don't know, just be careful on your actions. May I also say, as we are here today celebrating the women, we are an organization which is on the move. We are an organization which represents the aspirations and the challenges of South Africans. We are here today as a democratic country because we fought for it. And you are the beneficiary of our struggles, of our pain. You've never suffered an inch. You have always stayed in comfort. You were always there, having a person who was there to take care of you. For us, we were there in the trenches when your fathers were shooting us in 1976. You were out there enjoying everything.
Point of order.
Honorable member. What point are you raising on?
Chairperson, it is, I would like you to rule whether it's parliamentary for the minister to make statements about the parents of members of this side of the House. No, let me hear. I don't think it's appropriate. My father didn't shoot anybody, and I find it offensive.
Honorable member.
So, can I finish? Can I finish, please?
Yes, continue.
I can't hear you because the rabble are making a noise.
Order, honorable members. May I just get the point as raised?
And I find it offensive that the minister is making aspersions against my parents and the parents of our members here with no evidence of these allegations. We've heard today how we must now, sort of have this evidence of allegations.
Honorable members.
And I also don't think that the minister should be here lecturing me about how to behave, which she can't get to enforce the same in her own family.
Okay, no, thank you very much, honorable members. I would go back to the earlier caution that we received. Can I?
Before you rule,
received an
Chairperson.
order.
Before
Can
you
I be
rule,
allowed
Chairperson.
to rule on that, or maybe to make a remark on it? or to remark on what was said. Earlier on, we agreed that we need to be very cautious of the kind of words and inferences that we make in the House. At the same time, recognizing the freedom of speech and expression that the Constitution and the rules of the House and the country, of course, allows. So may we then, on the basis of that, allow the Minister to conclude her debate.
Thank you, thank you.
Honorable Panda, just hold, Honorable Member.
Thank you, Chairperson. I hope you noted that I waited until you had finished before I raised my hand.
Thank you very
to
much.
seek your permission
Thanks.
to address you. Chairperson, when the person presiding earlier cautioned the House about the nature of some of the statements we make and that we should have regard to Section 58 of the Powers and Privileges Act, the chairperson was roundly rejected with respect to that view. Now, if it pinches, Chair, and you're wearing it, it's most unfortunate. Thank you.
Just hold it. I'm not going to allow a debate on the matter. May I not allow honorable members' order? Honorable members' order. I think here now I am entitled to make a ruling. And the ruling is as follows. Honorable members, may we be cautious. May we be cautious. I don't want to go into and allow a debate on this particular matter. And therefore, allow the Minister to conclude her debate.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Just maybe also to Honorable Machesi. Masikhuluma ulwimi lwethu. Abafazana, you must understand ukuthi isho ukuthini. You demeaning us. Angiyomfazana mina, ngumfazi ogcwele. Umama wabantwana owenda, angiyena umfazana. So I'm just saying the terminology we use becomes very, very important. And also we need to bear in mind that women's rights are human rights as they are enshrined in the Bill of Rights. So make sure whatever we say and do, our women are always respected. Because for all of us, we have to make sure that our struggles, that of gender, is recognized by everybody. Honorable Chairperson, thank you very much for this debate where we remember our mothers who fought many struggles, but also all the men who joined hands in taking us forward and making South Africa to be where it is today. The struggle in the ANC is about a struggle of human rights. It's about a struggle of non-racial, non-sexist, prosperous, democratic South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister and members. That concludes the debate and the business of the joint sitting. The House may rise.